Because it's less fungible. Bear in mind there's 20 mil or 15 mil.
Hello, good morning, everybody. We're just slightly late, it's after 9:30. Welcome to the third committee meeting of the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee. Welcome on this fine sunny day. First of all, we'll do a round of introductions from the committee, particularly for people in the public gallery who may not have been to one of these before. My name is Stephen Williams. I'm the Liberal Democrat Councillor for Westbury-on-Trim and Henleys, and I chair this committee, and I'll now ask my councillor colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with the Vice Chair.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Emily Clark, Labour Councillor for Bedminster Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Hope for its works through the mosque. Tom Blenkinsop, Labour Councillor for Avonmouth and Morris Glasgow.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Deston, Labour Councillor for Philwood.
Hi, I'm Councillor Henry.
Good morning, my name is Ed Fraser. I'm a Green Party Councillor for Easton.
Colin Van, Green Party Councillor for St George Central.
Hi, I'm Abdul Malik, Councillor for Ashley Ward.
I'm Feedhands, Green Party Councillor for Riverland.
Right, thank you everybody, and you will see that there are various chief officers in the room as well, and I'll introduce them as we go through our business and what role they are playing. First of all, can I outline the emergency evacuation procedures? If there is an unexpected fire alarm in the public gallery, please go down, out of the gallery, back through the lobby, out onto the ramp, and the assembly point is outside the cathedral. Usually, that's a routine announcement. Today it isn't, because there is an expected fire alarm test at 10 o'clock. That happens every Friday. It's not just for our convenience today. So please don't jump too much when the fire alarm will go off at 10 o'clock. It should go off quite quickly, and there's no need to leave. If it's a prolonged one, then the security will tell us whether it's a real alarm. Right, if we can go on to agenda item 2. Everyone is here, so and there are no substitutes, so there are no apologies or substitutions. Point 3, do any members have any declarations of interest to do with the business that is on the agenda? Councillor Malik.
Chair, to do with the expansion of the cemetery, item 8, I'd like to declare that I'm Chair of Eastern German Mosque, and we have a mortuary that deals with the deceased and does the final rites of the Muslim community. A lot of the time, the first option for burial is South Bristol Cemetery. Recently, on a couple of occasions, I've helped the council with burying people that have had no next of kin.
Okay.
At South Bristol Cemetery.
I think that's the declaration of a general interest, not a pecuniary interest, so that people are clear. Thank you, Uncle. No other interests. Right. Agenda item 4 is to note the minutes of the last meeting held on the 23rd of August. I propose that we accept these minutes as a truthful record of our deliberations last time. Could somebody second that, please, if there are no observations?
Yes, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. So we content to confirm those minutes as a record of our last meeting, please indicate. Thank you. Right, if we go on to item 5, which is Chair's announcements. Don't worry, I've not got a long peroration, but also I do want to say we've got 4 substantial items of business in front of us today on allotments, on the expansion of South Bristol Cemetery, then on the public health, nursing service, and finally some quarterly performance indicators, which is something that every committee has to look at. The first two have proven to be contentious in the past. Don't know how that's going to turn out today, but after the first two, I'm proposing that we have a very short break, comfort break for members of the committee and members of the public, if you wish to do so at appropriate time. The second item, I just want to say, we'll talk more to it when we come to it, but obviously it is an emotionally charged situation, and I would just plead with everyone, members of council and members of the public, please remain calm and rational. Everyone wants to get through this in a good way and arrive at a sound decision, even if people aren't happy with it. Right, we'll go on now to the public forum. Just to explain, all of these policy committees are scheduled to last 3 hours, so we wouldn't be expecting to finish around about 20 to 1. And 30 minutes of these meetings is given over to the public to ask questions and to make statements. For this meeting, and indeed for our last meeting as well, we are heavily oversubscribed in terms of the volume of questions and the volume of statements, and that means, I'm afraid, some people will be disappointed. My colleagues in Democratic Services have been asking people whether they intend to come and ask their question or make their statement, and thank you to those who have indicated that you are going to be present. In some cases, we haven't heard back. In a lot of cases, we haven't heard back from people. So we don't know whether people have come to ask. I'm going to split the time the same way as I did at our last meeting, 20 minutes for questions, because that's interactive, and then 10 minutes for the statements. The statements, just to explain, we've had 142 statements submitted. It is clearly impossible. We could give over the whole of the meeting and probably still wouldn't get through them. So for those of you who I've called to make your statement, please keep to within 1 minute. Members all had the statement pack and can be deemed to have read through them from yesterday till today. If you wish to speak to your statement, if I call you, please keep to the 1 minute. Amy to my left will be having a stopwatch on so that we can make sure that no one is taking an unfair allocation of time. So please respect that position and don't try and crowd out someone else who wants to speak. Right, we'll come to the questions first. Just to explain how this works. The answers are available, the formal answers for traffic officers are up on the screens, so you can see them as I work my way through them. If I call upon you to ask your question, there's no need to re-ask it. I'll just ask you if you've got a supplementary question, and if you've got one, please keep it brief, and it does have to relate to the formal answer that you've been given. So you're allowed up to 2 supplementary questions as well, but again, please recognise we haven't got unlimited time. So first of all, is Sally Wyatt here?
I am, yeah.
Right, Sally, you are going first. Your question on allotments.
Hello. I'm just asking if you're going to be charging for the water, will we be now allowed to use our hose pipes to siphon the water down to our plots? That's something you can answer.
When possible, I answer the questions. When it's something operational and technical like that, I will ask an officer to answer. In this case, one of the allotment officers will have to answer. Richard Fletcher, second part.
Yeah, so at the moment, hose pipes are under still a temporary ban based on health and safety advice, so that hasn't changed as yet. We're aware that's an issue for some allotment tenants, and we're aware that there are concerns and questions around equalities regarding water transfer, so we will be working with the forum and talking to the forum about that at a later date.
Thank you, Richard. Sally, you submitted 2 questions. Do you have another supplementary you're entitled to?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's very right, up next we've got Derek Patterson on plant-based catering. Derek, are you here? Okay, he's asking a supplementary.
Thank you. Thanks for your reply. I do understand that the council's direct internal catering costs are low, but recent evidence has shown that when political leaders set an example, it can have a very large impact on public behavioural change. From your reply, it's not clear to me if this committee can action the changes it indicated would be possible. So may I ask what the actual decision-making process is? Perhaps it would be by the Strategy and Resources Committee rather than this one. It would be really helpful to know the exact process and people involved in the council that decide upon catering policy. Thank you.
Just for background, as part of earlier budget decisions made by the last administration, the whole catering contract for the entire council and all of our parks, cafes, catering in this building, catering at the Mansion House is currently up for contract renewal, and we'll have to look at what bids come back for those contracts. But I guess at that point, officers will be able to make some observations about the many choices within it. Just in case the public get excited about this, councils don't get fed very often, so I appreciate the question, but in many cases it isn't really something that we are faced with about the choice of what we eat. Council sandwiches are not wonderful, and usually they are vegetarian, unless a councillor requests otherwise. And obviously people do have dietary requirements that we have to bear in mind as well. But question, Derek. Right, is Tim Beasley here? Right, Tim, if you ask a supplementary in a second, but can I ask Catherine Withers to stand by, because Catherine, I did see you come into the room. I'm going to call you next, okay? Which are questions 19, 20 and 21. But Tim, if you ask your supplementary now?
So this supplementary relates to the answers to questions 5 and 6. The point that we're trying to make is that you're likely today to agree with a rent increase that is above inflation but much better than it was last December. However, you've got nothing in place for a rent set up for a rent increase for the following year. So we're suggesting that you amend the proposal to include a rent increase that is at the rate of inflation that will come into force for 26-27. Otherwise, we'll be back here in a year's time arguing the toss about what that rate increase will be. It will take up more time, more officer time, and it will be a waste of time because a lot of us will have to come back. So why not introduce now a sensible increase for the year after next?
Tim, thank you for your question, and thank you for the for meeting me with your rent committee colleagues a little while back. It is a good point. None of us wanted to be in this situation. Hopefully we've got a clear way forward for the next rent increase. I guess the only indication I can make is the magnitude of the rent increase that follows will be nothing like what is on the table for today. I don't think we can commit to a particular rate of inflation, whether CPI or RPI. That will be one of the considerations that any part of the council will make in terms of setting its rents and charges. But other factors to do with the council's budget come into it as well. So I don't think we can be absolutely precise today about what proposal will come back in a year's time, but I understand what you're saying. I think the one assurance I can give is that it will be significantly lower than what we've got now, and we'll look to doing annual increases, which is ideally what would have happened in the past as well. Thank you. Catherine, you can see the printed answers to your questions, so you do have two supplementaries, so over to you. Wait for the microphone to get to you first.
You probably hear me now.
I can, but not everyone might be able to.
Okay, right. The council has made the confidence that the ecological survey met industry standards. However, we only received it 3 hours before the original planning meeting on the 29th of November, didn't have time to look at it in any detail. Also, I agree, Rupert is a qualified ecologist, but for some reason his report is not of industry standards. We don't know why. We have 3 eminent ecologists who say there are problems with this report and it's not fit for purpose.
Question?
Okay, that's a rhetorical question, I think. Director Smith or right. John Smith, who is the Executive Director of Growth and Resources, so he is the most senior officer in this area.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, well, the answer is as stated, as you said. We have worked with a suitably qualified ecologist, and he has explained the basis and the approach on which he's done his report. I don't have anything further to add to that, I'm afraid.
Okay, Catherine, you can have a second supplementary if you wish.
Okay. Natural England, you say, have been informed of the NG5 grassland within the SNCI. Can you tell me what date that you informed them, and have you requested surveys from them as they've offered to do at the appropriate time of year between May and July?
The officers have met with Natural England. I don't think we've requested any surveys. John?
We've not requested any surveys, no. We have met Natural England and informed them actually that there is actually MG5 grassland there. We've also informed them that actually the area of proposed development is actually sort of outside the area where there's MG5 grassland.
When was the question?
So as part of the update on the report, I will be giving an update on communication with Natural England.
Thank you, Catherine. So those points.
We've met with Natural England in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
So you did inform them when the report was done in 2020?
The Natural England would have been actually full consultative planning process. So that would have been back actually sort of earlier last year, also towards the end of last year.
And you told them about the NG5 grassland?
Well, they would have been a full consultee as part of the actual planning process, and actually we had conversation with them in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Actually, when we explained to them actually sort of where the actual MG5 grassland is, as per the actual ecology report which we commissioned, and made them aware, as I said earlier, the fact that actually the area developed both the actual drainage attenuation pond and the actual sort of proposal of the burial ground is actually sort of outside where the MG5 grassland is situated.
Okay, I'll have to, because of the situation you're in, Catherine, I'll actually 4 supplementaries there, but please everyone else stick to the 1 or 2. Right, we'll go back to the running order. Is Sarah Freeman here?
My supplementary question is regarding the 55k savings cost in the allotment budget that doesn't go back into allotments, but goes back into the Bristol City Council Central Fund. This is unfair and unreasonable that we are having to pay for this, and I would like it removed. When is it going to be removed?
Thank you, Sarah. And I agree with you, this does look like an anomaly, but I can assure you it's not an anomaly that is visited onto the allotments service solely. All of these budget targets from either the Council's full budget in 2022 or 2023 or 2024 are imposed right across the Council. They're either savings targets or income raising targets, and if you just think about it generally about all the price increases we've received as citizens. Car parking charges would be an example, fees for people who've got permits in the residence parking zones, cafe prices, my own gym membership, all sorts of things have been raised about above what might be considered reasonable as part of the way that every local authority in the country settles its budget every year. So this isn't something that's peculiar to the allotment service, it's something that is just unfortunate right across the Council's budget and indeed every local authority because of the cost pressures that we're all facing. Right, Danica Priest, over to you, Danica, I can see you here. off you go, Danica. You've got 2 supplementaries if you wish.
So a follow-up question. So given that the council does have a record of our request, because we've met with the head of parks personally to establish a friends of group, and now you guys approve it, that many tasks in the draft lab, like scrub clearance, are identical to the work that I do at Manorwood Valley in the gym. So would the council be willing to work with the friends of group to manage the SNCI, yes or no?
Because it's quite difficult to hear that, were you asking would the council be willing to work with a friends group?
Friends of group, yeah. Would the council be willing to work with the friends of group?
Say it again, so we really couldn't hear you.
So the end bit, would the council be willing to work with a friends of group to manage the SNCI, yes or no?
Yes. We have a Friends of policy, and any residents that approach us in relation to the site, we'd be very happy to work with.
Brilliant. The second follow-up for the second question is, the report you're referring to mentions scrub encroachment only in a small portion of the site, and scrub clearance already occurred there in July. How can the broader claim of degradation be justified when the active management efforts similar to those proposed in the LEM are already in place and could be sustained without the expansion?
I will have an attempt at answering that question. So the scrub, over the last few years, there's been quite significant scrub encroachment on the grassland. One of the significant ecological benefits of the site is the grassland. We visited the site, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago. It was quite clear from the areas where the scrub had been cleared from that had had an impact on the grass. So this has happened over some years, and certainly the council have been responsible for that time. So we're not seeking to apportion blame to anyone, but clearly that scrub encroachment has an impact on the grassland. That was very visible from the visit.
It's not in the report comment here.
I'm sorry.
On to my next question. So, could you provide the specific name of the current officer responsible for overseeing the South Bristol cemetery expansion decisions and the drawing surveys? We understand that Fern previously held positions.
You've had 2 supplementaries, Danica. It's a maximum of 2 supplementaries, otherwise we won't get through it. But I think I will answer what you say. It wouldn't be fair for us to specifically name officers. Senior officers of the council who are here today are in the public domain, but officers who report to them we wouldn't normally name in public. Okay, next, Anne Dehaan. Are you here, Anne? Next, we have got a couple of councillors submitting. Councillors do have an opportunity at members' forum at full council to ask questions, but as this is a very local issue to Councillor Freeman on this occasion, we'll take a supplementary from you, Ellie.
I'm actually happy with the answers to both questions, and I'll give time to the public to answer more. Thanks.
Thank you. That was a model response. Thank you very much, Ellie. Right, Joshua Roberts, are you here?
Yeah, so you say there's no MG5...
Wait for the microphone, please, no matter how loud you are.
So I walked the land with the council representative a few weeks ago, and the site clearly did contain MG5 grassland. Can the officers tell me what's changed in such a short period, or can you provide the evidence that it's not there?
John?
We've not said there's actually there's not MG5 grassland there. There is MG5 grassland. What we're saying is actually the area of actually proposed burial site, the actual attenuation pond, and the actual sort of sealed drainage pipe is actually not within an area where MG5 grassland is actually identified.
That's not true. Can you show us the evidence?
That is true, because actually our ecologists have actually sort of done that. We've recently had a further conversation with them to actually sort of to confirm that.
Where's the survey? Can you show us it's true? It's not true.
Right. Well, the officers answered the question. Councillors have to rely on the advice that is given to them by officers, and often that advice is informed by external consultants who are more specialists as well. We have been told, and everyone has just heard the answer from John James, the head of Natural Marine and Environment, that while there is MG5 grassland in the SNCI, in the particular field where the attenuation pond may go, depending on what we decide, where the drainage pipe, underground drainage pipe may go, there is no MG5 grassland in those areas. So just summarising what John says, nobody is saying there was no MG5 grassland at all in the SNCI, but in the particular areas affected by what we might decide today, we are advised that there is not.
Can you show us the surveys that attest to this?
You have quite a few supplementaries now, but obviously a survey has been done, otherwise we wouldn't have got that assurance.
We're asking for evidence.
Thank you. The ecological surveys have been made available to the committee and to consultees. We haven't generally made them available and published them, and there are particular reasons for that. And I think that's consistent with the approach of other local authorities and indeed the planning inspectorate around protecting ecological species. But if an individual wishes to approach us and request that information, we'd be happy to consider providing it. That's the approach we take.
That sounds very dodgy.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've heard the answer, and the answer did, just in case people didn't hear it, make it clear that this council is not doing anything that any other local authority in England wouldn't do, or indeed the planning inspectorate as well. But you also heard the offer, if someone wants to come in and meet us directly, then that information could be shared. And indeed, as planning consultees, that was done in the past. Right, I'm going to move on now to Thomas Pearce. Thomas, are you here?
He's just taking his daughter to the toilet.
Right, if he's back just before 10 past, I'll come back to him. Next, got another elected member, Councillor Poltley. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to my first question, I suppose my question is it fair to say then, if someone was to characterise the current situation as there being a pressing need or an urgent need for additional faith-based burial spots or denominational burial spots, that would be misleading. There is no pressing or urgent need. There is no concern that we're imminently running out of faith-based burial spots.
So, Councillor, I just refer you to the report. So the report's clear that there is what the timeline for non-denominational requirements is mid-2026, and there's a table which sets out the availability in the currently designated areas for denominational. I don't have any other countries, although to review.
Okay, so seven years. Okay, thank you. And as a supplementary to my second question, clearly the committee has made use of the availability of officers to have at least 5 meetings to provide further context, further information. In the run-up to this meeting, in the lead-in, there have been other meetings subsequently since this report was written, where officers provided yet further information. I'm just wondering what the content of those briefings was. Is there anything, for example, that's in those briefings that is not in the papers today? There's no restricted section, there's no redacted section, there's no additional information provided to the committee.
It's probably best if I answer that. Guys, we're in early stages of the committee system, and I have tried to run this committee by making sure that all the members of the committee have as much opportunity as possible to have access to the information. The chair and the vice chair have a place within the council constitution to have regular briefings, just in interest of transparency. Myself and Emily have a regular briefing it would normally be this time, in fact, every Friday morning. I have a lot of other briefings in between. The briefing to this committee is enormous. It is fair to say that this particular topic has taken up, probably rightly, I'm sure many of you will say, a lot of member time and officer time. So I have probably had lots of individual conversations with officers, but you'd expect that, wouldn't you? But all the other members of the committee have had additional oral briefings as well. There have been site visits to the sites as well. every single member of the committee, not all at the same time, but groups of us did go, have been around the area of land that is in council ownership, the former Elm Farm, that was acquired by the council for this purpose. So we've all been there. We haven't just read the reports. We've walked around the site. We've seen where the pipe might be going. We've seen where the attenuation pond will go. A formal note of site visits, we're not a planning committee, isn't taken. I'm just now putting on the record. We've not just had oral briefings, written briefings, but we've physically been to the site with a group of officers as well. And in addition, I know other members have as well, have met Catherine Withers at Yew Tree Farm to hear directly her very personal perspective as well. So I think we've really bent over backwards to absorb as much information as we can, but some of that has been informal and not part of the formal briefing process. I hope that helps. Right, we've got 4 minutes.
Thomas Pearce is back.
If Thomas Pearce is back, he can now ask his question, Thomas.
I don't have any supplementary though, sorry.
Okay, even better. Right. We'll just take one more question, if you're here, Katie, on allotments, just to change the subject. Katie Ladbrook, are you here?
Not here.
No, but in that case, we'll move on to statements. Please bear in mind what I said earlier. We are hugely oversubscribed for statements, so if I call you to speak, please keep your remarks to within 1 minute. Don't feel the need to read out your statement verbatim. If you can extemporize, bite it, all the better, but keep within a minute. Now, the first person who I've got an indication, first of all, is Ruth Keck here?
No, she's not.
Right, okay. Is Alistair Sorday here?
Yes.
Right. Alistair, 1 minute, please. When you go back.
Thanks. We all know that we're living through a time of existential crisis. This is not a regular meeting. This is a crisis meeting in a time of ecological emergency. It is largely caused by our foolishness and our willingness to compromise with forces which harm our environment. In Bristol, we understand this and acknowledge it. We've even declared an ecological emergency, and we were a green capital city. We have, to the relief of all who place human survival as our highest priority, an administration that understands this. As a city, we're proud of our city farms, land wrenched from the grasp of developers and planners to provide vast benefits of which we are all aware. Here, we face the prospect of allowing an actual working farm, Bristol's last, to be overwhelmed by housing and avoidable expansion of a cemetery. If we lose tens of beautiful farming acres, are we to then congratulate ourselves in later years on rescuing a couple of them for another city farm?
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you very much. Right. I appreciate the clapping, just bear in mind it's slightly eroded time. Have we got Helen Powell here? No? Mark Ashdown? Somebody's just stood up. Okay, 1 minute, please, Mark.
Bristol Tree Farm was involved in this matter from the outset. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right from the rather doomed application for a lawful planning development which occurred way back in 2021. We've made many rational and carefully considered arguments about this application, all of which I hope you all already have read, and there are a lot, I'm afraid. We even sent you an email yesterday pointing out a fundamental flaw in the biodiversity net gain calculation. which, if that was accepted, would mean that this application, as approved, will result in a net loss of biodiversity of nearly 15%. I asked you to consider that very carefully. You also ignored in the conversation about natural England the fact that this is also a priority lowland calcareous grassland habitat.
Can you call your remarks for close, please, Mark?
Please do not allow the SNCI here to be further degraded by these plans. Thank
you. Louise Matthews, you here, Louise?
Yeah.
At the back, wait for the mic to come to you. Thanks, Louise. 1 minute.
U2 Farm is a precious place that should be left as it is, the last working farm in Bristol. A wonderful haven for nature in a time when we are losing so many of these protected places, and we should be doing all that we can to protect them. The UK is one of the worst places in the world for losing important wildlife habitats. It's no wonder the world is in the state that it is in. I live in the Ashton Ward and regularly walk through the meadow. Enjoy seeing all the different wildlife in this open space. A haven for my well-being, along with many others, enjoying the different species of wildlife here. I feel passionately that U2 Farm's SNCI habitat is a rare and precious asset within Bristol's ecosystem. It should be preserved from development and destruction. I urge the committee to choose option 3, no expansion, as there are better options available and so much evidence of harm to South Bristol's environment.
Is Bonnie Welch here?
Thank you. I'm here today as a representative of Bristol-based organisation, the Sustainable Food Trust, and myself, a local resident. As many others have expressed, U2 Farm is a site of significant ecological importance. However, I would like to draw particular attention to the importance of the farm to the health of local members of the community as a green space for footpath users and community groups. I've been working closely with Catherine for the past 2 years, delivering a green social prescribing project at the farm, the first of its kind in the UK. Initiated by our patron King Charles and in partnership with the College of Medicine and the University of Bristol, we have been working with GPs and primary care networks across the city, enabling a wide range of people to visit the farm for activities that improve health and well-being. Participants have included those suffering from loneliness, isolation and bereavement, as well as a range of other mental and physical health challenges. Our evaluation demonstrates the incredibly positive impact the farm has on individuals from across Bristol. Linking nature recovery with improved health outcomes is something that Natural England, the Combined Authority and West of England Nature Partnership is extremely supportive of. And further research is currently underway to demonstrate the cost saving to the NHS of such initiatives.
Thanks, Bonnie. Before you mark the first. Anita Bennett, you here?
And maybe it's just easier not to have that noise going on.
That's another microphone we can switch.
Off you go, Lisa.
Well, first of all, I think as we've learned, certainly in the last administration, it is a mistake to always rely on what officers say. I think really briefly, everybody else has all the information. People have spent weeks, months, years trying to gather this information. What I'm asking the committee is simply to have some courage. Courage to pause. It takes a lot of courage to just say, let's just stop and investigate for ourselves and make all of those surveys public, make them available. There's nothing to hide. We need to bring the city together, especially with what we've been through. We need to prove that Bristol is a green capital. We have an opportunity to do this. So what? Just admit maybe we're wrong and just start again.
Thank you, Lisa. Right, we're going to have a quick change of subject if the Sheraton Road Neighbourhood Watch hear about pharmacy provision, but I'll ask Catherine Withers to stand by. I'll call you next. So, thank you. Can you just give your name, because we've just got the...
My name is Frances Robertson.
Thank you, Frances.
We've had a local pharmacy on Southmead Road for 40 years. In January 2024, Boots closed it despite massive opposition. Another independent pharmacy applied to the NHS to open a replacement pharmacy on the same site. This was refused permission under a very convoluted NHS process. So we've been left without any pharmacy nor a GP practice in our neighbourhood. The NHS requires patients to consult a pharmacist rather than a doctor for many ailments, but then they've refused a replacement pharmacy. We ask that this committee supports our efforts to have a replacement pharmacy in that area. We also ask that the committee chair makes representations to the Health and Wellbeing Board, I know he's chair of that as well, the Integrated Care Board, and whoever else the committee considers appropriate in order to help us get back a local pharmacy. The decision-making process specifically excluded the public. Our views were given no weight in the decision process. We're very concerned that we patients are not being properly taken into account when decisions about access to pharmacies are being made, not least because we are purposely excluded from the process because no one wants to be involved. Our neighbourhood still needs a local pharmacy, and the need is urgent.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So Catherine Withers will speak next, and then I'm going to give the final opportunity to speak to Stuart McCarthy-Thompson from Avon Wildlife Trust. I'm using my chair's discretion to pretend I can't see the time.
Thank you, Stephen, and happy birthday. Okay, am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, global wildlife populations have plummeted by 73% in 50 years. It is astonishing that we are even here discussing digging up an SNCI and adding runoff pollution to a struggling watercourse. In the UK, in Bristol, the very first city to declare an ecological emergency. I'm here representing all Bristol's SNCIs and the land I love. And I'm not here alone. The community has spoken. Scientists, ecologists, your One City partner, Avon Wildlife Trust, a statutory body, Natural England, ex-leaders and charity bosses, social prescribers and doctors have spoken. We have a voice and we are yelling. The fragile habitat and wildlife we are desperate to protect doesn't. Today is the test of the resolve and the will within our elected councillors to stand up to those who work behind the scenes but absorb no blame to do better for Bristol, ask for high and robust standards and leave the SNCI completely unharmed.
Thanks for birthday wishes and thanks for the chocolate cake we had together last week. It's a early birthday present. Thank you very much. Right, very last statement. We are running over. I thought it was important to hear from Avon Wildlife Trust. I think Stuart is here.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's Avon Wildlife Trust view that in an ecological emergency, the only option is no development of Yew Tree Farm SNCI. The SNCI designation at Yew Tree Farm is an acknowledgement of the importance of this site for nature, the unique mosaic of habitats including species-rich grassland, hedgerows and woodland. Such designation should ensure protection from future developments. Habitat fragmentation and pressure from development are major threats to species-rich grassland, and it's important that this habitat is preserved. The SNCI supports a wide range of species including plants, bats and birds that are increasingly scarce in the surrounding areas. With multiple pressures from encroachment, it's vital that the SNCI is protected from all future developments that would irrevocably damage this important wildlife habitat. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart, and thank you to everyone who's spoken today, and thank you to everyone who's come along to try and speak. I'm really sorry we can't accommodate everybody, but I did try and take what I thought were voices that needed to be heard. Right, we're now going to move on to the formal parts of our business, the four papers that we have in front of us, and we're going to start with agenda item 7, which is the allotment rents and tenancy agreements paper. This report seeks approval for new allotment rents and water service charges to be implemented from October 2025 and to approve that the stakeholder engagement process is progressed to review the way in which allotment rents and charges are structured and to review and where necessary update the allotment tenancy agreement and tenancy rules to reflect current allotment legislation and practice. Before I hand over to Chief Officer to speak to this was obviously a deferred item from our last meeting on August the 23rd, when we thought it was important to air the issues that meeting, but we didn't feel we were at the right point to make a decision that commanded public confidence. So I deferred the decision until today, and as promised on August the 23rd, we've had more deliberations amongst colleagues on the committee, and I've met, and I know other members of the committee have met as well, with representatives of the Allotment Forum and other campaign groups, and I know some members of the committee have visited allotments as well to see things firsthand and to hear from people who are tilling the allotment sites. So thank you for everyone who's talked to us. We've tried to make the process as open as possible and to listen to all viewpoints. And the paper that we have in front of us today is radically different from last time. The quantum of the rent increase that is proposed, and just to remind people who may not know this, that there has been no rent increase since 2018, but the quantum of the rent increase that is proposed today is materially lower than what came before the committee last time. Furthermore, where there were different rent increases and quite wild anomalies in the percentage increases in between the bands in the previous paper, we've done away with all of that, and the increase, I accept one wants to pay an increase, but the increase is now uniform. All the other items that were in the last paper, like moving to direct debit, extending the remit of the concessions that are available to people, are back in this paper. And there's also an indication this came out of discussions that we had with Allotment Forum members, that we don't want to be in this position again. First of all, we want to get to regular, modest rent increases, but we also want to consult with you, engage with you on switching to a different charging basis. So instead of a flat charge for a given plot size, we'll actually do it in a much more, if you wish to, do it in a much more granular way by square meterage. So that's an overview of where we are and why we're here again today. I'll now hand over to John James, the Head of Natural, Marine and Environment at the Council, to give his professional overview of the paper, and then we'll open it up to contributions from members.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up what you were just saying, yes, this paper is actually deferred from the actual August committee meeting, so we're back here today to actually present the actual new paper, following meetings carried out between the actual party leads, to look at the actual how we can actually respond to the actual concerns and challenges made as a result of the conversations that were had. So the new rent proposals contained within this paper applies a 52% increase across each plot banding. So that, as you say, addresses the actual disparity between the actual the increase of bandings that the previous reports have had. So, for example, give an example, the most popular sized plot, which is actually 75 to 149 square metres, is currently charged £50 per year, will increase to £76 per year. Compared to the actual previous paper from August, which was £89 per year in the August paper. So the difference, as you can see, from 70 it's gone down to 76 per annum for what we call our most popular allotment plot. As with the previous proposals, we will extend the eligibility for low-income discounts. And in the paper it states that that will include tenants in receipt of universal credit, pension credit, along with the current criteria for those entitled to housing benefit element and the universal credit and council tax reductions. We will also extend a discount to collective food growing groups, community groups, where we can identify there's a positive social value contribution to disadvantaged groups. As stated already by the Chair, that what we're introducing is an opportunity to pay by monthly direct debits or quarterly direct debits. So that's something that we're going to introduce to help manage the increases. In terms of the additional income, generated, we've estimated actually sort of this paper actually estimates actually an increase of £116,000 per annum, which the actual rent increase will actually create. Compared to actually sort of the previous paper, which actually was estimating a £206,000 actually per annum increase in actually sort of rent from actually sort of allotments which are actually managed directly managed by the actual local authority. The income will be used to actually support the services revenue budget by allowing for one additional allotment officer. That's something that actually we've had discussions with actually sort of a lot of the actual people we've discussed, allotment holders, etc., the groups that we work with, because we recognise there's a need to actually sort of provide additional support to both actually sort of the allotment holders, but also our actual volunteer site representatives. So that's something we want this actually funding to go towards. There is also the actual need to offset the actual 55k budget saving, which was actually implemented from actually 2022. So what we're hoping to do through this process, and subject to this actual paper being agreed, is the allotment, actually the additional allotment officer. We are anticipating we can actually bring this actually allotment officer in from actually sort of April 2025. But that will be subject to actually some number of people actually that sign up to the actual sort of the actual sort of quarterly or actually sort of monthly direct debits. There will be a small amount of actually residual budget left from that £116,000, and that will go towards upgrading our allotment actually management software, which we've discussed actually with the allotments forum, and also looking at actually how we can actually utilise some of the remaining money to actually sort of clear abandoned plots to actually address actually sort of the waiting list. As probably people know, but I'll just make this statement that under the Allotment Act, tenants are entitled to 12 months' notice of any rent increase. So therefore, this rent increase would not actually sort of come in until October 2025. In response to the feedback regarding the current pricing structure being used and the banding system, we will engage with actually sort of our stakeholders on the ways the allotment rents can be structured, including an approach actually on the square meterage rate. In addition to this, the allotment tenancy agreements and rules will be reviewed to reflect the current legislation and practice to provide clarity on what is permitted. The recommendations are as laid out in the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any observations from the committee? Emily?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So our previous amendment proposed a hardship fund, but we understand that there are difficulties with that. But we do also understand that as well as the discounts for people on benefits, officers will exercise discretion to waive fees for those who are unable to pay. So could I just ask today that officers work up a short policy to formalise this and bring it to a policy committee chair's briefing for review?
Yeah, I very much welcome that. Emily, it's a very helpful suggestion. So I'd like officers to do that, to bring to our regular chair's briefing, which Emily attends as well, so we can understand what leeway and discretion is sort of operated in the background, if you like, without having a formal policy in place, but we do recognise that hardship may exist, and furthermore that there are very good examples of plot holders who in fact are discharging social value and are working with perhaps deprived communities or particular groups. Recently I met with a charity that was celebrating its 30th anniversary Step Together, who have 2 allotment sites in South Bristol, and they work with young people who are not in education, employment or training to try and give them some regular activities and to prepare them perhaps for work or just to do something sociable together. So there is much more to allotments than the growing of vegetables and other plants, and health and well-being is a key part of it. And we do have some discretion in the background as to how we treat some plot holders. So I would endorse that, Emily. We would expect officers to bring that informal report to us. Right, any other contributions? Ed?
Thank you very much, and just say thank you, John, for presenting some new information in there that an allotment officer may well be able to be post as soon as April next year, if not during the summer months. That's a very welcome development. So I have a few questions related to pricing and payment. So the first question was if you could tell us a little bit more about the accessible plots, which are a new part of this and when accessible plots might be used. And if you could also let me know, if you indicate roughly how many of the 4,000 or so plots currently in existence include water within their rate charge.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm afraid we have to defer this to actually either Richard or Lorraine to actually respond to that, because they know the details in terms of actually accessible plots and the actual 4,000 plots which have got access to water.
Okay, Lorraine Smith will answer for the benefit of people in the area. Lorraine is the actual allotments manager.
Yes, so the accessible plots, we've got some that are raised beds on a variety of our sites. We've got them, we're trying to address them so that we actually create more raised beds so for those that have got access issues and vary it across Bristol so that those people that do need accessible plots, we can sort of have a separate waiting list for, and we can direct them into the nearest one along the side that's to where they live. Sorry, what was the second question?
So the second question is
so the number of sites that we haven't got water is probably easier to answer. In fact, we've got there are 6 sites that don't have water. So there's approximately, I think it's about sort of 70 tenants roughly across those sites.
Okay, so it's a significant minority of tenants in this case, thank you. And I'm aware that some members of the public have raised to us that some of the changes in the way the water charge is presented could result in a significant increase in water usage at often sites. I wonder if this has been considered within the pricing model.
We've based the water charge at the moment on the current usage. So if we do, we get billed in arrears. So you know, if we have a significant amount of water use, then we may have to look at the water charge being increased, but not necessarily the rent. So which is why we keep the water charge separate.
Okay, so just to clarify, it is possible for us to revisit this when the pricing structure is revisited during the next 12 months, so that's something we can revisit if we find that there is a change in behaviour with regards to water usage. And then the final question I had is, I'm been quite shocked to hear from the papers in August that even now that up until now allotment holders have not been able to pay by direct debit, which I'm sure we consider to be a matter of course in all other walks of life. And I wondered if had the previous administration introduced incremental price increases since 2018, would that have meant that direct debit payments could have been introduced at an earlier date?
The reason why we haven't done direct, we offer an annual direct debit, so we have introduced that in the last 2 years. But it's just because we invoice on an annual basis, which is why we haven't necessarily. We've when people have struggled to pay, they've approached us and we've done sort of like they can pay over 3 months rather than just the one outcome. But that's the only system we had set up. But with the price increase, obviously, it would be beneficial for those that want to spread it across quarterly or monthly.
Okay, I'll defer to committee members as I've asked quite enough questions now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add my thanks to the officers because this has been a long and winding path, but I think we're nearly there. The question I have is obviously there'll be additional people who will be paying the 50% because we've included additional benefits in the discount scheme. Are we fairly confident that the income we're predicting is about right? Because obviously we don't know quite how many people will be claiming that discount. Are we sort of around the middle of our projected income? Because 116 is quite precise, but are you kind of, I just don't think the position where you come back in 6 months' time and say, oh, we got it wrong, everyone's on benefits, we haven't got any money, broadly.
Councillor, admittedly, it is an estimate, but those estimates are based on actually sort of the information we've got, the number of people that are currently actually benefiting from actually the discount scheme. So we've had to make an estimate of that. You know, we're pretty confident that actually the actual figures we've got are accurate figures. But we only can see it actually depending on the number of people that come forward and actually sort of qualify for that. But it's based on actually information that we've actually sort of got at hand, the number of people that actually benefit from this moment. So we're confident it's reasonably accurate.
I hate to use the word, but it's a relatively conservative estimate, yeah, of income. Sorry, but
I wouldn't like to sort of say, I think it's an accurate estimate as much as we can get at this stage without knowing actually sort of who may come forward to actually sort of, especially for the actual new areas where we're going to sort of suggest that actually people can actually sort of get a discount from. So we're confident in much actually we think we've got £116,000. If we get more than that, then that will be good because actually that means we can actually do more investment into the actual office sites.
Okay, thank you.
Cara.
Thank you, Chair. I have questions around the rules and regulations. What new rules around allotment tenancy agreements have been issued to allotment holders in the last couple of years?
We've not actually issued any.
Thanks for confirming. And does this paper ask us to make any decisions regarding these rules?
What we're proposing to do is actually, we will actually go out and engage with actually some of the allotment holders, and actually, in terms of actually local rules, we'll bring that back to the actual committee in terms of actually sort of the changes being proposed.
Thanks, and that brings me exactly to my third question about the role that allotment holders going forward will have a louder voice on rules and regulations and on how they govern the allotments.
Yeah, so part of the process, as I said, in my sort of final few sort of statements, is actually what we will do is actually sort of engage with actually allotment holders to talk about how we're going to structure the actual fees and charges going forward. So an example there was actually sort of around the actual sort of utilising the square meterage rate, and in terms of actually the changes to the allotment actual tenancy agreements, rules, etc. That's again something that we'll engage with actually allotment holders on, and then bring that back to the committee.
Thank you. I look forward to that because I've certainly found in my dealings with allotment holders over the last few months that we've been able to have some really constructive discussions and they're a really informed and committed group of citizens.
Yeah, thanks, Cara. Can I sort of echo the tenor of what you're saying? I'm absolutely determined that we work with allotment holders going forward about possible change of the charging basis to square meterage, which is something that an idea that came from the allotments forum. But separately, all the terms and conditions that I know were controversial 9-10 months ago, whenever it was. One of the things I think that needs to be looked at for all sorts of reasons comes from Councillor Fraser's question about water and whether we can make sure that we're using water in the most ecological way possible, more use of water butts and so on to harvest some of the rainwater rather than charge for water usage, so the money goes to wasted water. But that's one of the areas that we will certainly want to look at. Apple.
Thank you, Chair. I just think for the benefit of the gallery, it might be worth us knowing a bit more about the site rep, the context of the allotments.
In terms of their actually roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, so how the site reps?
Okay, well I'm going to look across to Lorraine to explain that, because Lorraine sort of engages and actually sort of effectively identifies as site reps.
So yeah, we have tenants who put themselves forward as site reps, and they help with the letting of plots, meeting people off the waiting list, contacting them, and showing vacant plots when they're available. They act as a sort of, we hold regular site rep meetings, so we provide updates, and then are able to speak about problems and if there's repairs, maintenance, and those types of things. They get their plot for free in exchange for the work that they do. Was there anything sort of specific that you wanted to know about the site reps?
Yeah, I suppose it's how will the site reps benefit? With the second allotment officer, I mean, what's the benefit of that?
Yeah, so at the moment, obviously, there's one officer covering the whole of Bristol. We've got about 100 site reps. So having the additional officer will certainly speed up our sort of communication, correspondence, just being able to get back to people. The amount of emails that we receive, just not only from site reps but from tenants as well, it's huge amount of communication, so that would definitely help. We'll just get things done quickly.
Right, if there are no other observations from the committee, we'll move to the recommendations, which bear with me, I have to read out. And these are that the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee, 1, notes the outcome of the call-in committee decision on the 27th of March 2024, including the issues raised on the public forum questions and statements. Secondly, notes the outcome of the consultation as set out in this report in Appendix F, and which have been taken into account in the recommendations before this committee today. Thirdly, approves the revised allotment rent and charges set out in this report and Appendix A2, and the expansion of the discount scheme to enable more people on low incomes to benefit from a 50% reduced rent as outlined in this report. 4, notes notes the introduction of further direct debit payments to allow for quarterly or monthly payments. Fifthly, authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Public Health and Communities Committee, to take all steps required to implement the revised allotment rents and charges and undertake the stakeholder engagement as set out in paragraph 9 of this report. And finally, sixthly, further approves the stakeholder engagement process to update the allotment tenancy agreement and update the tenancy rules, which will be subject of a further future report to the Public Health and Communities Committee. So I propose those recommendations. Can you second, please?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right, could all those who are in favour of the recommendations as just outlined please indicate? That is carried unanimously, so thank you very much. And it's good to have resolved for now this position. And as I say, we look forward to working with the different forums and what representatives going forward. So thank you to those of you who've come along today and for your engagement so far and for what's to come as well. Okay.
Chair, can I request a 5-minute adjournment for the next item, please?
Okay, 5 minutes or... Right, we'll have a quick 5-minute comfort break. This is a public gallery. We had a pre-meeting before this, so it's been quite a long time since members have done what they need to do. So we'll resume at 1:45.
We'll have a comfort read. That's okay. No, it's the control. Oh, I'm so...
So we'll come now to agenda item 8. Bristol Cemetery capacity and options for future provision. This report informs members on the remaining provision of Bristol's burial and cremated remains plots and requests the committee to consider options for future provision of burials and cremated remains plots. And that sentence is fairly important. You all know this is the third meeting of the committee system, but this paper is topical and controversial, but it's actually a constitutional novelty for us as well, because we have options to vote on. It's not a straight up and down recommendation. My birthday has been referred to already. For those of you who are curious, I'm celebrating my 18th birthday for the 40th time. I was a councillor. I was the baby of the council during the 1990s, and that's the last time we had the committee system. It's the last time a public options paper such as this would have come before the committee. We had the leader in cabinet and the mayor in cabinet, as you know, in the intervening period. I will explain the procedure at the relevant points so that people can follow what we're doing, and so we can remind ourselves what we're doing as well. But in terms of an introduction, before I hand over to John Smith, the job of the committee and the job of the council is to make a decision on behalf of the whole of the city of Bristol. And quite often we have a difficult balancing act to strike. And quite often our decisions are controversial, and quite often they're emotionally charged as well. This is a very good example of an emotionally charged decision that we have to make. On the one hand, we have to consider the still very concurrent need amongst a significant section of the population to memorialise their loved ones. I mentioned earlier that all of the committee at different times have been to South Bristol Cemetery. I'm sure in the ordinary course of our lives we go to other cemeteries as well. But what struck me when we went to South Bristol Cemetery, not only were there quite new gravestones there as well, but there were flowers all over the site. I was particularly struck by an enormous floral display that when I asked the cemetery manager about it, he said was from the traveller community. Burial is particularly important for them. Burial, either of the whole body or of cremated remains, is still a reasonable expectation that a large number of people in our city will have, and they will want to plan for it. But for some of our communities, it's more than a reasonable expectation. It's a tenet of their faith, or it's an expectation of their faith as well. And the most obvious examples are Muslims and Jews, but also there are other communities as well, such as the Polish Catholic community in Bristol. So that's a very important consideration that we do have in front of us. But I mentioned this as a balance. Obviously, burial involves land, and land is precious in Bristol, and some of the remaining green space that there is in Bristol is viewed as an incredibly precious resource for the city. So we do take our responsibilities incredibly seriously. I mentioned earlier that the committee has had lots of formal and informal conversations about this, and all 9 of us have taken this issue very seriously indeed, what is before us. We know what is at stake, we know there are competing interests, and we know some people are deeply invested in that land and what happens to it in the future. So we do have a difficult decision in front of us today, but I assure everybody listening that we don't arrive today on a whim. We've considered everything very carefully, and we're about to consider it very carefully in public as well. Right, I will now hand over to John Smith, who is the most senior council officer with us today. John is the Executive Director for Resource Growth and Regeneration. Sorry, we've got a long job. John is the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, but he is the most senior officer with us today. And he's going to give a professional introduction to the report. Then we'll have a general discussion amongst the committee. Then we'll get to the formal business of considering the options, and I'll explain at that point what we're going to do. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Chair. This paper provides a briefing to the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee on the remaining provision of Bristol's burial and cremated remains plots, and invites the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee to consider options for future provision of burials and cremated remains plots. This issue has gathered a lot of public interest, and I acknowledge and hold strong views about the provision of burial and ash interment facilities in the city and important ecological considerations. The officer team and myself have been mindful of the ecological issues and issues around burial and cremation services when working on this paper. The South Bristol site was identified for the purpose of providing a cemetery many years ago, and planning permission was obtained for the construction of the cemetery in 1962. The future provision of burial services at the site has been considered by the Cabinet of the previous administration a number of times, most recently in January of this year, when funding was agreed for an expansion of the cemetery at South Bristol. Planning consent was granted for an expansion scheme in April 2024, after a planning decision was approved by committee in November 2023. The consented scheme constitutes option 1 in the paper, and you've got the plan which gives the background and some of the areas up on the screen. The proposal with option 1 is to provide additional burial cremated remains and memorial plots in areas 1 and 3, referred to in the report, to be delivered in 2 phases. This is land owned by Bristol City Council and is part of a locally designated site of nature conservation interest. The impact on the SNCI was a key consideration of the proposal and the planning application and consent. This land, previously grazed by Elm Farm, where the potential additional burial capacity in area 3 would be provided, and the attenuation pond and drainage pipes would be situated, is in the SNCI area. It has been owned, as I said, by Bristol City Council since well before the Planning Commission in the 1960s, and since earlier this year has been the subject of a formal grazing licence to members of the Withers family from the neighbouring Yew Tree Farm. This licence was provided expressly subject to the need for cemetery expansion. The council-owned land affected by the proposed expansion, option 1, is a small proportion of the overall land which is grazed by the Withers family. In relation to demand for burial plots, the detailed projections are set out in the report, but it is anticipated that the remaining capacity for non-denominational coffin burials will be exhausted in mid-2026. There are a number of dedicated denominational burial areas, and the forecast periods of remaining capacity are somewhat longer than that, as the Council flagged, and are set out in Appendix A1 in the report. The financial impacts of the project are set out in the report. The net adverse revenue impact of the Council not providing further coffin burials, cremated ash interments, and memorial-related services is forecast to be £876,000 per annum. The capital funding of £2.4 million for the expansion has already been agreed at Cabinet. The Council identified the South Bristol Cemetery site as an appropriate site for a cemetery and an expansion many years ago, as part of the process of seeking to identify additional capacity when Canford Cemetery was nearing capacity. An extensive search of suitable sites in North Bristol was undertaken. and details of this work has been shared with committee members. The paper sets out 3 options, and the committee are requested to identify the preferred option. So option 1 is continuation of the current project to expand South Bristol Cemetery, to proceed with the project as consented, burials within the SNCI, delivering approximately 1,550 standard coffin burial plots, 800 cremated remains plots, and 260 baby burial plots in 2025, with phase 2 to follow in approximately 2039. The second option is to continue with the project but on a reduced scale, remove Area 3 from the project, no burials within the SNCI area, only proceed with Area 1 expansion. This will still require the attenuation pond to be formed within the SNCI and to install drainage from the cemetery site to the attenuation pond. This will deliver approximately 870 standard coffin burial plots, 800 cremated remains plots, and 260 baby burial plots in 2025. This provides forecast provision for up to 10 years. Additionally, this option is to set up a member task and finish group to determine the mid and long-term future of Bristol's burial provision. Finally, the third option, to stop the expansion project in its entirety. This would result in no additional burials, no works or grassland restoration within the SNCI, and no works to existing drainage systems. The council has sufficient land to offer burials, as I said, non-denomination burials until mid-2026. After that time, residents will need to seek burial ground outside of the city for non-denominational burials. At present, the cost of maintaining the city cemetery is offset by the income from providing burial services. Option 3 would therefore create a net new revenue budget pressure of 876,000 from the date that burial provision ceases. This option would not stop the works on the Muslim burial area already contained in the current cemetery site, which forms part of the South Bristol capital scheme. As stated above, an attenuation pond and drainage solution is proposed as part of both options 1 and 2, and the solution is proposed following extensive design and ecological work, and bearing in mind the ground conditions and drainage routes. The proposed drainage pipeline to the attenuation pond involves digging a trench of less than 30 centimetres in width, and the actual pipe laid in the trench will be a sealed and buried pipe measuring 15 centimetres in width. Members of the team recently met with Natural England, and they have emailed us and asked us to share the response. It has been provided to members of the committee. With your agreement, Chair, I will read that out. So this is from Natural England to one of our officers. Thank you for seeking to understand Natural England's views on the cemetery expansion at South Bristol Crematorium and the adjacent Site of Nature Conservation Importance, SNCI. As well as your request for comment, Natural England, including one of our national grassland specialists, has also been asked by other parties to comment on the site. In the interest of transparency, we would welcome this email being shared as part of publicly available information related to the decision-making process for the site, and to intend to share it with other parties that have sought our views. We understand that while the cemetery expansion has an existing planning permission, Bristol City Council is in the process of reviewing options, and that this includes further consideration of possible harm to priority habitat grassland that is locally designated as a site of nature conservation importance. One of our national grassland specialists who I've liaised with was contacted by an interested party about the site several weeks ago and sent the 2020 survey report carried out on the council's behalf by Wessex Ecology. After reading the survey, our specialist verbally communicated that based on that survey, it is probable that SNCI includes some NG5 grassland communities. However, while the report is adequate for assessing cemetery expansion options, we cannot be sure about exact locations and extent of NG5. That would require a more detailed programme of survey work. We also note that the Manchik website indicates the SNCI areas containing lowlands calcareous grassland priority habitat, the evidence cited as being the Bristol Grassland Survey 1991. Turning to the question of SSSI designation, sites might be considered for notification if it contains a significant quantity of NG5 grassland, but based on the limited information we have seen and the other factors that feed into that process, there is little prospect of the site being notified. Nevertheless, in reviewing options for the expansion, we would expect the Council to follow the mitigation hierarchy for locally or nationally important sites of importance for nature. First seeking to avoid impacts, then minimising, mitigating, and lastly compensating where residual impacts are unavoidable. There are likely to be opportunities for enhancing the SNCI and its immediate surroundings. We gather that options for expansion include a field outside of the SNCI, clearly favourable in terms of avoiding direct loss of priority habitat, but which likely requires drainage works to replace the existing pipework, as well as an attenuation pond. If this was a seal pipe that passes under but does not drain important habitats within the SNCI, we would expect it to be possible to design and route in a way that avoids harm. Similarly, we would expect it to be feasible for the design and location of an attenuation pond to avoid the best quality grassland, which is likely to be on the steepest slopes of the SNCI. In summary, we would underline that we have not visited the site, but hope that the commentary above, in conjunction with evidence and knowledge that the Council and its ecologist has of the site, is helpful in reaching a decision. Ideally, options being considered include courses of action that maintain the biodiversity interest that the Council has deemed worthy of protection. And that's from the Principal Manager of Sussex Team Natural Info. That's it, Jeff.
Thank you, John. Thank you for, I thought it was important that the whole statement of Natural England that we've had was read out. There have been various observations made about Natural England's opinion, but that is the opinion that we've received. Right, who would like to go first from the committee? We've got Tom and then Fee.
So I'll just preface my remarks by saying happy 18th birthday. I have some questions around that, but I'll focus on the SNCI. So as we can see on the map, this is the first question, and one thing that's come up a lot in the public statements is the 10 acres of usable land within the cemetery. Now, I've visited that. I know full well that some of the area is very hilly and may not be suitable. But if you could specify if there is any other space at the cemetery which is usable for expansion, that would be very helpful.
So within the existing cemetery, we do have some burial spaces already described, actually, which will keep us going until actually sort of mid-2026. On the face of it, when you actually sort of look at the actual cemetery, it does look like there's lots of actually sort of available land. However, that land is housed cremated remains, and the majority of that land is already actually sort of utilised for cremated remains. And there's a small portion left for cremated remains, so that's something we've already indicated in the report, that we have sufficient land for cremated remains to actually also around mid-2026. There are other areas within the actual cemetery. So if you're familiar with the cemetery, as you drive in, there's an area of grassland as you just drive in opposite the actual sort of main office, which again looks like it could be actually made available for burial. But what we've got there is the main gas going down to the actual sort of cremator, and also main electricity supply. So again, that actually sort of negates that ability to actually utilise that land for actually sort of burial space. Other areas, as you stated, are too steep, or we've identified actually sort of bedrock. During the actual sort of pandemic, we were looking for additional land within the actual sort of cemetery site, and we identified actually sort of additional land. So again, as you're coming into the actual site, you will see new burials ground in amongst the actual sort of tree, which again is unusual for us to do that, but again we looked at actually sort of what available space could be actually sort of utilised, and therefore we have utilised additional actually space where we can. We're now predicting actually sort of on the basis of actually the current sort of prediction of actually some annual burials that we will run out by 2026, mid-2026. So therefore, the land that looks available is not available because it's either conditions are not correct, so bedrock is quite close to the surface, or that actually it's already being sort of utilised for cremated remains.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Just sort of making that point on alternative vision, obviously there's been a lot of consideration around alternative sites that might be available in North and South Bristol, and I think it would help for the committee and for the public to ask, what has been done to find an alternative site? What other alternative sites might exist in Bristol?
So, as actually John has actually stated, the actual sort of South Bristol land, actually the whole site was actually sort of secured for actually burial site prior to 1960. Planning consent was actually secured in 1962 for the actual whole site. But what we've actually sort of done there, what was done actually sort of prior to actually us being involved in this, is actually sort of we segregated the site so we could concentrate on actually sort of the site that we're currently using, which is the actual crematorium, and also the actual sort of current burial site. But always in mind that actually the remainder of the site will be utilised for actually a burial site in the future where the needs actually happen. We've got Camford actually in North Bristol, which actually we've got both a crematorium there and also a burial ground there.
the burial capacity that ran out about 12 months ago, and we've got another number of actually burial sites within actually Bristol. We started to actually bury in areas of actually which are fairly unusual to actually bury because of the need to actually try and identify sort of land. And that was effectively when we started actually providing grave space in former pathways. So those pathways are now eroded because we've actually sort of got actually sort of grave spaces there. In terms of our efforts to actually sort of try and identify an alternative actually sort of land, we carried out extensive work in actually sort of North Bristol to actually sort of see if there was actually sort of suitable land. We looked at a number of actually sort of sites. We actually sort of engaged with actually an external company who specialises in the actual sort of provision of actually sort of burials, cremations, etc. And that was narrowed down to actually sort of a small number of actually sites which could be had more detail and further investigation. Those sites were actually ruled out on a number of reasons in terms of actually sort of it was prone to flooding, it was actually sort of the land was actually had obstructions or contaminations within it. The bedrock was actually sort of too high to the surface, which means you couldn't actually do a double burial, etc. All road access, egress was actually sort of problematic because it was a very challenging actually sort of area to actually sort of be managed. So we did extensively in North Bristol, South Bristol, as I said, but because we already had a burial sort of a space there, you know, we were relying on actually sort of you know, the South Bristol to actually provide us with future provision going forward. Thank you. So on that kind of note, and I appreciate this will not be an easy question.
Can you speak just a bit closer to the mic? I think it's quite hard for people to hear.
That's very bad. Sorry about that. So if we hypothetically had a nice, but less ecologically impactful site somewhere in the city, greenbelt land, how much would it cost to get that site up and running, both in the financial terms, so the actual work on the site, any roads or parking that's going to be needed, the infrastructure around it, but also the ecological impact that all of that work might have on the area? Just some guidance on what that would look like would be very helpful.
So obviously, without having a specific site, it's quite difficult to actually, give you a detailed answer around this. But in general terms, the benefit that we've got with actually South Bristol sort of cemetery is we've already got infrastructure there. We've already got power supply, we've got roads, we've got buildings, we've got actually sort of areas of actually storage, etc. So the access into South Bristol is already there. So if we hypothetically were able to actually sort of identify another site which was a suitable size, and actually sort of also went through the process of actually sort of getting actually environmental agency actually consent. We had sufficient actually depth of actually ground for carrying out burials. That would require infrastructure being brought into that site. Depending on the type of land, again, that will actually determine the impact to the actual sort of environment as well. But clearly, actually, we would have to bring in, completely new roads, actually pathways, infrastructure, both actually sort of utilities, water, electricity, would have to be brought into those sites. So we're working to a budget at the moment of actually £2.4 million worth of actually sort of cost, based on actually that we're going to create burial space. If we're going to be bringing in actually sort of new infrastructure, and again, this is very, very general. We've estimated without any chapel provision, again, depending on where we were located, if it was in close proximity to actually sort of South Bristol, then we could utilise this existing sort of chapel. If we didn't, then we'd have to look at actually chapel provision. If we were, we've estimated actually on top of the 2.4, you could be looking at actually a minimum without chapel provision of about another £2 million worth of actually some cost. But that cost is very much determined upon the actual sort of site that we identified.
Just for clarity, that extra 2 million is site preparation costs. It doesn't include the acquisition of the land if it wasn't city council owned already.
It doesn't include acquisition of land. It's based on actually we can find land that's owned by Bristol City Council. Obviously, that would, acquisition of land would require us maybe actually to do a compulsory purchase order because land within the city is going to have lots and lots of actually usage, and ideas for usage, be it actually sort of food growing, be it actually sort of tree canopy work, be it actually residential or commercial.
So,
Need to bring some other members. One more question?
One more question, though. Thank you for that. So 2 million and then going up from there. So
additional 2 million.
Additional 2 million, yes. Sorry, thank you. So just one last point, because you did mention impact, and I think it is important to ask this. Can you explain what you believe the impact of each option will be on Yew Tree Farm, including both the impact on the land and the impact on the business, possibly also the impact on the social prescribing work, if that's going to be different?
So for the first option, actually we're progressing actually as planning approvals actually sort of being secured. If we're looking at actually phase 1, that has a percentage actually take of actually sort of the land that actually sort of Yew Tree Farm currently has benefit from of about 1.15%. So that's actually in the whole. So that's how much land it will take in terms of actually that impact. If you actually sort of look at option 2, then obviously you're not having a burial sort of space there, so the actual sort of impact upon the actual Yew Tree Farm is minimal. There's a drainage actually sort of route going in, and there's an attenuation pond going in. And the attenuation pond that was originally proposed is actually sort of reduced down quite considerably. We're now looking at an area of 900 square metres for the attenuation pond. So option 2 would be really minimal. It would probably be sort of like 0 point something actually percent, and that's where the attenuation pond is actually sort of being located. And then option 3, well, clear with option 3, that would have no impact whatsoever because we'd be sort of ceasing actually sort of provision of burial space.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. So, Councillor Feehanks next.
Hello. I know a lot more about drainage than I did a month ago, but I want to talk about the drainage issues. Plus, just a couple of issues that, I mean, we've all had fairly standard email from lots of people concerned about the future of Yew Tree Farm, so I wanted to address some of those in my questions. So, first one is drainage. You mentioned the letter from Natural England that suggested that if the pipe was closed, that wasn't going to be much of a problem. It is a closed pipe we're proposing, isn't it?
It's always been intended that actually it would be a closed pipe, 150 mil sort of closed
That's
pipe.
understanding it. And of the 2 types of water, there have been concerns that College's Brook would be polluted with runoff. And that's runoff surface water, isn't it, that would be taken through the pipe. But the grey or more polluted water, that's a Wessex Water issue. They're happy with the way it's going to be dealt with, and also the Environment Agency are happy with the way that we're dealing with the various drainage issues, are they not?
So in terms of actually the consent process, we have to actually sort of go through the actual Environment Agency to actually sort of secure and demonstrate actually what we've got in place. The Environment Agency have actually sort of looked at the actual proposed scheme and actually sort of said there is a low risk. You're not going to get any better than that, to be honest, but there is a low risk of actually any pollutants. The drainage scheme is there to actually sort of take surface water, because in the area 1, outside of the actual SNCI, that we need to be able to take water away from that. So that water will be taken away through the actual sort of 150 mil pipe down to the attenuation pond. Currently, there is actually sort of a drainage pipe which goes into the actual sort of the SNCI, and as you know, when you've seen the site, that drainage pipe is actually spilling onto the SNCI and creating basically quite a significant scar on the SNCI land. The new drainage pipe would actually sort of remove that sort of issue.
Right, we have seen that, but I did mean surface water rather than runoff. I'm sorry, they're different things. I now know. Other issues, there's a concern that were any development of any kind to take place on this particular SNCI, there will be ramifications for other SNCIs or the wider area of this particular SNCI. Can you clarify what impact specific development as defined in these papers would have on other areas of the SNCI? It's in essence, does it set a precedent of some variety for this SNCI?
No, that's what I'm saying. It wouldn't set a precedent because every sort of view of an SNCI would be taken actually in its actually sort of entirety. We would look at actually. We would look at every SNCI and what was being proposed. We've gone through very rigorous actually sort of proposal of actually sort of what we want to do and how we do it.
I don't know anything to add to what you said. I mean, each site is looked at on its merits and the particular issues. Obviously, the background and history to this site and the ecological studies that are specific to the site.
I think I'll just add some common sense clarification. I'm not professional here, but every proposal for use of land in the city has to go through a development control process. and our colleagues who sit on the development control committees would have to assess that. So precedent obviously exists in law in general, but this is for cemetery provision, so it would be an extremely limited precedent, I think, in common sense terms. I don't think it paves the way for any other development on SNCI.
That was my understanding. Can I just check a final thing as well? The pipe as proposed for options 1 and 2, how much, broadly speaking, is that going to cost?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that figure. I'm going to sort of gaze across there, actually, Tom Wally to see if he can actually provide an estimate of actually the cost.
Tom Wally is a consultant to the council. He is the project manager.
To answer that question, that's a very specific part of the overall construction cost. So I would probably, sorry, it's a very specific part of the overall construction cost. So I'd probably have to come back to you. But
Okay, but my point is, seeing that it's in the email we'll receive, it's probably less than 2.4 million.
Oh, yes, clearly, it's going to be considerably less than 2.4 million, yes.
Okay. No, it's just that did seem quite high for me. The inflation with other costs, so I'm just checking, that's my understanding, that it would be considerably under 2.4 million as per the email we will receive. Thank you, just to clarify that.
Lisa, and on to Ed.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I've just got a couple more questions about the attenuation pond. So you've touched on this just now, but can you just clarify, if the committee were to go for option 2 today, so no burials within the SNCI, is there still a need to have the attenuation pond within the SNCI?
The simple answer is actually yes, there is still a need for an attenuation pond because we still need to actually sort of take surface water from the actual sort of burial site proposed outside the actual SNCI so that we can actually sort of get water off that site. So, yeah.
Thank you. And given that the pond will be within an SNCI, and there is mention in the report of how having the drainage and the pond within the SNCI will actually improve the SNCI. Can you explain how, given that it's previously untouched grassland in that area, how will a pond be better than what's currently there?
So in terms of actually sort of the proposal that's being made, again we've had an ecologist to actually sort of look at this, and again sort of referring to actually sort of what was the chair, and actually John has said they were relying on actually sort of their professional expertise in terms of that. But the actual landscape ecological management plan does actually sort of put forward a number of actually improvements to the actual sort of site, and actually that will be over a 30-year management plan. So the actual attenuation pond has a number of actually sort of things we need to actually sort of include within there. So it will create actually sort of wetland habitat actually sort of within that area. So our ecologist has made it clear to us that actually there are more positives than actually negatives actually in what we're doing in terms of actually landscape ecological management plan.
Councillor, yes, as the Natural England report makes clear, it talks about the fact that there are likely to be opportunities for enhancing the SNCI and its needed surroundings. And that's what the ecological report talks about, bringing additional biodiversity net gain and other improvements.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I've got a series of questions around dormice and hedgerows. There's been quite a lot of discourse around this in recent weeks. Could you just briefly explain, to the gallery, for everyone's benefit, the types of environments that dormice would typically live in, and where dormice have been sighted in surrounding areas near to the site in question today?
Personally, I'm not an ecologist, so I'm not actually sort of say exactly the type of habitat that dormice actually sort of require. But what I can say is actually we've had actually sort of an ecologist actually to work with the actual council to actually sort of look at areas within the actual sort of SNCI for the area which actually sort of we are looking to actually sort of proposals for the burial site, attenuation pond, etc. They've actually sort of put in place place a number of actually boxes, and those boxes are actually being monitored on a regular basis. I think there's about 50 boxes in total, which are actually being located in the various different areas. Those areas are determined on actually sort of which possibly actually is good actually sort of environment for actually sort of dormice to actually sort of live in. They've actually sort of viewed, they're doing a monthly review of that, and actually sort of going checking the boxes on a monthly basis. That is to be concluded at the end of this month. So far, there has actually been no identification of dormice within actually sort of that survey. I do understand that actually dormice have been sort of identified or noticed outside of that area, but certainly our survey results of today have not identified any dormice activity within the actual sort of SNCI which we're looking to use for the burial space.
Thank you very much for your answer. So moving on to hedgerows. So am I right in understanding that some of the drainage routes under, if the attenuation pond is installed, we need to run through some of the hedgerows, particularly in the middle field. And I wonder if you can explain some more specific details to the galleries as to how those drainage routes will be constructed and where they might interact with hedgerows.
So firstly, the actual sort of drainage channel that we've identified is not actually fixed. So we've explained that before to the members on the actual sort of tour which will be assigned to show you the actual sort of area proposed. So the location of actually the pipes actually are considered the best location. In consideration of that, we work with our ecologists on that, and the areas actually sort of identified for the attenuation pond and the actual sealed pipe are outside any MG5 actually sort of grassland. Where there's actually hedgerows, we are choosing locations where there are gaps in that hedgerow to actually sort of locate the actual sort of to actually take the water pipe through. And in terms of actually where it goes into the actual Colebrook stream, then we would actually sort of consider that, and actually is there an alternative route which takes it away from the oak tree, which could actually sort of access the actual brook actually earlier than actually sort of taking it into that gap in the gateway into the actual brook itself.
Thank you. And just following from that, are we aware of any other wildlife that could be adversely impacted by drains going through those hedgerows? And hypothetically, if we found out tomorrow that there were dormice in some of those boxes as part of the study you mentioned from the ecologist, what impact would digging the drains then have on their habitat?
So in terms of actually any other adverse impacts on any other wildlife, we're not aware of actually, so that's not being brought through in terms of actually any ecologist reports we've had. If hypothetically the dormice was actually sort of found actually sort of within the actual sort of area, that would have to be a consideration as part of the actual work that we do. So again, we would actually have to provide a method statement on how we would deal with that, and that would have to be sort of signed off through the actual sort of planning process, etc.
Thank you very much. And finally, just to summarise, are you satisfied that digging the drains through these hedgerows would not have an adverse effect on wildlife within the SNCI?
We're satisfied that actually wouldn't have an adverse effect because we're going to avoid actually sort of, as far as we can, actually sort of digging through actually sort of hedgerows. We are going to go adjacent to hedgerows, but not necessarily through hedgerows.
I'll defer to other committee members for further questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed. Abdul, you're next.
Thank you. Because we're talking about the general part of this report, I want to talk a bit about the history, without mentioning names of any person, I suppose. Can you explain to me when we kind of realised as a council that we were running out of burial space? South Bristol obviously was a site that we've had for many years. It was handed as a convenience to the people who look after it, who are on the site at the moment. I don't understand how the planning application and everything would have gone through without the conversation about the site and its importance. And there doesn't seem to be any mitigation to that when taken back.
So in terms of actually sort of when did we first know that we were running out of actually sort of burial space, that's been known for a while. I've been working for the council since about 2019, and when I first started, that was a project that was still ongoing, looking at actually sort of the actual sort of provision of future burial space. So it goes back as far as that. The pandemic did come in, actually sort of delayed the actual development of that project, and that's where at the time we were looking actually for sites within actually sort of North Bristol to see how we could actually accommodate the immediate actually sort of running out of actually Camford. Camford has now happened, we now have no longer burial space, so every burial that we provide within Bristol goes to South Bristol now. So that's what it's probably about, I'll say 2018, 19, and probably a little bit before that, when we recognised actually we needed to actually sort of address the actual burial shortage, and it could be before that. In terms of actually sort of sorry, can you repeat your actual sort of final question, Councillor?
So we've had land with the potential ownership of the council to expand the cemetery of South Bristol since the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Why was the conversation not had with the people that used it, or the convenience they had for so many years, when we're trying to revert back to having it as a burial land? Obviously there would have been a conversation, was that conversation, was there a process of that conversation?
So in terms of actually sort of that process, when we started to develop the actual sort of project in detail, the actual sort of the actual grazing license with another actually sort of person within the actual sort of area, they had a grazing license for that land. So when we first started looking at that, we actually then had a conversation with that person about the termination of their grazing license, so that we could actually establish a burial site for the actual South Bristol area within the SNCI.
Okay, so you say since 2019 we've had the conversation, yet it seems that in 2019 there was £6 million which was allocated, but we lost that since then. So look at any expansion?
Yeah, so that was a result of, in terms of actually the budgetary process going through, there was an initial actually sort of budget provided, and that was for both actually sort of South Bristol and North Bristol, because we've got a demand to actually sort of address the actual ageing crematories within actually sort of North Bristol, so that's one element of that. Through budget processes, actually sort of reallocation of actually sort of budget, which happens every year within the actual council. Yes, that funding was removed, but then we sort of moved forward to actually sort of look at other ways we could actually sort of fund the actual sort of expansion of actually South Bristol. So originally it was through capital borrowing, but actually so the scheme now is actually funded through strategic sale.
Okay, finally, with reference to the SNCI and the LEMP plan or process, what's the timeline in all of this, and why haven't we got that at the moment to look at?
So one of the planning conditions of actually for us to actually produce a sort of a landscape ecological management plan. So that's what we're required to do. That is in the process of being developed. There's been various versions of that developed. We are close to actually having that sort of document completed. And we then just need to sort of submit that to planning to get that signed off in terms of actually that's how we'll manage the actual land over the next 30 years.
And will that cover some of the concerns that the public have?
Yes, and that sort of plan is being shared with actually sort of people from outside the actual sort of council in terms of actually what we're doing. And so in terms of actually sort of how we manage, how we graze the site, that's all within the actual thing. So for instance, the site, because of the actual sort of state of SNCI, if you look at a standard cemetery, where you can probably go in there and see the grass being cut quite sort of closely, the approach here was actually the grass would be allowed to grow longer, so we're not going to actually have tightly mown lawns within the actual sort of cemetery area.
I was just going to add to that. So as well as the LEMP, there's a CHEM, isn't there, John? It's a construction ecological management plan, so that will be being brought in.
Yes, that's correct. So there is actually sort of a construction management plan we have to put in place, and that also has to be signed off. And that, in terms of actually, is how we approach the actual sort of works initially, and how we carry out the work. So, for example, in terms of actually drainage, we have to provide a clear method statement of how we're going to actually sort of implement the actual works, how we can actually minimise any impact to the actual SNCI through the works we're carrying out. So that's another process we have to actually sort of make sure we have signed off.
Just for clarity on that, I hate acronyms, and whether people in public gallery do as well. I know there are some experts, they might know what these acronyms mean. The CEMP is the Construction Environmental Ecological Management Plan. So any contractor who we procure to do work, if necessary, in this area will have to comply with those standards. So that's a short-term plan. So that's a short-term plan, but the LEM, which is the Land Ecological Management Plan, is a long-term plan for the whole site. Just, I think that's the situation. It would be helpful if you confirm that my understanding is correct.
You're correct, Chair, that is correct. CEMP is actually sort of a short-term plan for actually instigating and implementing the actual scheme, and then there will be the LEM, which is the actual Landscape Ecological Management Plan, will be actually sort of there to actually sort of manage the site, and we have to have a 30-year plan.
I'm sorry, I've got slightly cut across just to get clarity on the acronyms.
Yes, I've got clarity. I think that's the question for general.
Back to Fee.
You mentioned that the CEMP, the construction management plan, has had to be approved. Who approves it?
That has not yet been approved because we have to yet sort of work that out.
Sure, who would approve it?
Sorry.
The external body?
Yeah, so that would have to go through, I'm going to just look across the Tom, but that would have to go through planning, is that correct? Yeah, so that would have to go to planning to actually sign that off. So we would take that to planning just to sort of demonstrate that we are doing
That's a transparent document then?
Yes, it is. And we have to, we just need to demonstrate we're mitigating actually everything we can in terms of actually the work we're carrying out.
Just to be absolutely clear again, when you say take to planning, do you mean officers determining, or it goes to one of the development control committees?
My understanding is delegated authority of planning officer to actually sign that off in the same way as actually the Landscape Ecological Management Plan is.
Right. I've not been on our planning committee for a long time, but there are development control chairs in the room, and I believe that they would have oversight if they wish to of this. I strongly suspect that they would wish to have oversight of something that is of public interest. So it would have democratic oversight. One of the chairs of the planning committee, AOB, is nodding at me. Right. Emily.
Yeah, thank you. Could I just ask about the impact of each of the options on otters and also the bats population at the SNCI?
The information we received from the ecological actually reports, the conversation with the ecology officer, there will be no impact upon bats or the actual otters within the actual sort of area.
Okay, and I think you raised the oak tree in response to Councillor Fraser's questions, but can I just clarify as well what the impact of each of the options will be on the oak tree by the brook?
So if you look at both the actual where we've got consent for and option 2, both actually sort of are stated to require actually sort of a drainage channel which goes down from actually sort of area 1 and option 1 sort of goes actually from area 1 and also where the proposed burial spaces within the SNCI. Both of those actually sort of land drainage connections actually sort of go into the attenuation pond. From the attenuation pond, then there's a drainage channel that's sort of going out which connects into the actual brook. The proposal at the moment is to actually sort of take that sort of pipe to connect into the brook sort of alongside the actual oak tree. But as I said previously, that is not fixed. If there is an alternative actually sort of route which can take us away from the oak tree, we will explore that route. Again, this comes down to the actual sort of construction management plan that we need to put in place. So if there is a clearer route which is going to have less detrimental impact, then we would actually take that route, which would take it away from the oak tree.
Okay, thank you. And I've had a number of emails from people who use the land at Yew Tree Farm and also the cemetery for walking and recreation. And I'm concerned about the loss of this space to the South Bristol community, including for people in my ward in Bedminster. So can you just explain what the impact of the options will be on local people's ability to access the land for health and well-being purposes?
I don't see actually sort of any sort of limitation to actually anybody currently accessing the actual sort of land. effectively the land will be more accessible because, you will be constructing actually a burial ground. And so I do not see actually how that will impact on anybody at all. I'd like to think the actual project is going to actually provide additional benefits for people within the actual sort of access.
Rubbish!
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Karen?
In the discussion before and during the meeting and in public statements, there's been a lot of allegations about officers being misleading and not to be trusted, which I imagine is very hard for officers to take in their professional capacity. I'm also aware that in lots of the public statements that I've read, there is misinformation, there's conflation of different issues, and there are allegations and assertions which some of which you've put to bed today. For example, the idea that there's 10 acres of available burial space currently in the cemetery. But clearly trust has broken down in this process significantly, and we all, to move forward in any way whatsoever, need to be able to rebuild that trust. So Stephen, this is probably a question for you, but what will you do to win the trust of the people who want to protect nature, which is what we all want. We want to protect the SNCI, we want to protect nature at heart, and we want to protect the city and its finances and its burial space and its parks going forward.
The option 3 then.
I didn't have any forewarning of that question. Thank you, Karen. All I can say is chair this committee, and maybe the process we went through with the allotments is a clear example of that I want us to operate in as clear and as transparent and engaging way as possible, not only amongst each other as elected members, in the run-up to the referendum on the mayoral system and in justifying it in our most recent local elections. I said 9 pairs of eyes on key decisions will be greatly beneficial when we come to something controversial. And we've proven that today with both the allotments paper and with this paper as well. So there was much more engagement by members, but there's also wider engagement across the council as well, I think. The administration have views about how we should describe it, but 6 of the chairs are Green Party members, and 2 of the chairs are Liberal Democrat members. People can judge whether the environment is in safe hands under that stewardship. That's up to other people to judge. Speaking for myself, I value green spaces, I value engagement, and I've tried very hard in this process to engage with as many people as possible. Not even just the statements we've had today, but reading all the emails that come through. Sorry if I've not been able to reply to all of them, but meeting with people as well who had a voice that they felt hadn't been heard in the past. This is not a perfect process, and decision making is often very mucky, but I think we've tried our best to immerse ourselves in the detail of this. As I said when I introduced this report, we know we've got a careful balance to strike today. It is a reasonable expectation amongst thousands of people who live in our city that they should be able to memorialise their loved ones. That is something we have to bear in mind. It is also, and this is something of increased importance, people value precious green space in the city as well. Hopefully we can strike that balance today and maybe set an example for what this committee and what other committees might have to consider in the future. Right. I said at the start we'd have a general discussion about the paper. I think, looking at my colleagues, we've got to that point. So now we're going to go through the formal part of the paper of considering the recommendations, the options that are in front of us. First of all, I have to ask the committee to formally note the paper. It's not a decision, it's to note in recommendation 1, to note the contents of the report and the details provided in the appendices. So I move that we do note the paper. Somebody second that? Thank you, Fee. So take it as read, we have noted the paper and indeed discussed it. We'll now move on to recommendation 2. And this paves the way for us to consider the options that you've heard, that everyone has heard described several times during the course of this meeting. So we first of all have to come to option 1. Now I'm going to formally move option 1. That is not an indication in my opinion. I'm formally moving it in order to allow a discussion if need be and a vote which we will certainly need. So I'm going to formally move option 1, and option 1 is continuation of the current project to expand South Bristol Cemetery, to proceed with the project as consented, including burials within the site of nature conservation interest, delivering approximately 1,550 standard coffin burial plots, 800 cremated remains plots, and 260 baby burial plots in 2025, with a phase 2 to follow in roughly 2039. Can I ask for a formal seconder of that? Is a formal seconding?
Seconded, if only to get it out of the way.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hens, for formally seconding that. Do members wish to have a discussion about option 1? Right, it's lots of shaking of heads. In that case, we'll go to a vote on option 1. Could those who are in favour of proceeding with option 1 please indicate now? Could those who do not wish to proceed with option 1 please indicate now? Right. Option 1, keep your hands up please. Option 1, for clarity, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who have expressly indicated they do not wish to proceed with option 1. Option 1 is therefore defeated and is off the table. Several members of the committee did not raise their hands. If you wish to formally record you've abstained to help Amy, do you want to indicate? Right, so that's 4 members of the committee have abstained on option 1. So that's all 9 of us accounted for. Right, I now have to move to option 2. So I will move option 2, and that is that the committee approves option 2 to continue with the project but on a reduced scale, to remove area 3, which was what was visible on the diagrams earlier, to remove area 3 from the project. This means there will be no burials at all within the SNCI. We would only be proceeding with the area 1 expansion, and for clarity, that's the field that is outside the SNCI, roughly in between the A38 and the cemetery, existing cemetery. This will still require the attenuation pond to be formed within the SNCI. This will deliver approximately 870 coffin burial plots, 800 cremated remains plots, and 260 baby burial plots in 2025. This means we'll be able to forecast provision will be available for up to 10 years. But in addition to that, so this problem is not going to go away, we will set up a member task and finish group to determine the medium and long-term future of Bristol's burial provision. So I'm formally proposing that. Can I have a formal seconder, please? Councillor Hans, thank you for formally seconding. I have had indications that there is an amendment to option 2, which Councillor Malik wishes to propose. Now, because this amendment is not in the papers, it's not been, it has been published, but a lot of people won't have read it. I'm afraid I'm going to ask Councillor Malik to read it out.
It hasn't actually been
Right. This is something new. This is generally new information, then, so it's even more important that Councillor Malik reads out the amendment, and a paper copy will be passed around the committee.
So thank you very much, Chair, and I would like to formally move this amendment, which is about option 2. If I spell it out and tell you the text that I feel that should remain and that should be added. So it starts, continue with the project but on a reduced scale, remove area 3 from the project, no burials within the SNCI area, only proceed with area 1 expansion, and then I would like removed the text. This will still require the attenuation pond to be formed within the SNCI. Like that bit removed, and I'd like to add The current plans require the continuation pond to be formed within the SNCI. However, officers will prioritise investigating alternative drainage solutions that do not rely on systems running through the SNCI. They will consider all mitigation options, and no final decisions regarding the drainage infrastructure will be made without thorough assessment of the environmental impact and the feasibility of alternatives, and then continues as is, deliver approximately 870 standard coffin burial plots, 800 cremated remain plots, 260 baby burial plots in 2025, and provides forecast provisions for up to 10 years, and then additionally set up a member task and finish group to determine the mid and long-term future of Bristol's burial provision.
Thank you. And also for those of you looking at the screens, is the red text that has been inserted. Right. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Amendment, sorry? Councillor Hans, thank you. Right, because this amendment was not in the original papers as one of the three options, I'm just going to ask Director Smith to comment on the amendment. Then what will happen is that members of the committee will have a concurrent discussion about both option 2 and the amendment. Then we will vote on the amendment, and then, subject to what happens there, we will vote on option 2, either as amended or as it stands. Okay? So, Director Smith, first please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just two observations from me. So the first thing to say is that the proposed drainage solution that is part of option 1 and option 2 has been proposed following extensive design and ecological work, bearing in mind the ground conditions and the drainage routes. To explore alternative options, of course, will involve bringing in further external expertise and will involve some cost and some delays. But I confirm if that is the preferred option of the committee, we will proceed with that additional work and we will carry it out objectively and in good faith and report back.
Thanks. Right, well, Abdul, you've proposed amendments. You get to speak first in that case.
Thank you, Chair. I present the amendment with a deep sense of responsibility to the residents, our environment and the future generations who will inherit the decisions we make today. As someone who has worked closely with burials for the past 2 decades, I know firsthand the significance of having a dignified resting place for our loved ones. But I also know the importance of protecting the precious green spaces we have left. Spaces like the site of natural conservation interest that we're talking about today. This amendment is not just about balancing numbers or ticking boxes, it's about balancing respect. Respect for families who deserve a place to bury their loved ones within the city, and respect for the rare and delicate habitats that make Bristol a home for more than just people. The area is more than land. It's a sanctuary for wildlife, a breath of fresh air for the community, and a symbol of our commitment to protecting nature in the face of rapid development. My amendment asked us, as requested, to pause, to look at alternative options before making any decisions that would harm this site. Let's not rush into facing drainage systems through the SNCI without fully understanding the extent of the potential damage. We owe it to people who live nearby, those who enjoy these green spaces, and wildlife that depends on it. This isn't about choosing between burial space and green space, it's about making sense and making sure we respect both, and that we get it right today. With this amendment, we will have the chance to explore alternative solutions and to ensure that if we must expand, we do so with the lightest possible footprint on the natural world. I ask for your support as members today, not just for this amendment, but for the values it represents. Dignity for our loved ones and dignity for the earth beneath us. Thank you.
Right, other members who wish to speak, it could be about the amendment specifically or option 2 in general. So I've got Tom and Lisa.
So thanks for that, and thank you, Abdul, for the speech. I do want to ask a few questions on finances, and I'll get to the amendment shortly on that. One thing is for clarity's sake, there are a couple of different numbers that are used within the report. You mentioned 876,000 as a loss to the council. but there's also a figure of 724,000 in the financial appendix of the financial advice. Could you explain which figure is correct and how much the council might lose out with option 3?
Yes, Councillor, they're two different figures talking about different things. So they are both correct, actually. So at the moment, the service provides a small surplus. John, have you got the figures there? It's, thank you. So, and the, so it's when you add the two figures together, you get the 856. Sorry, let me find the actual numbers.
This is the trouble having to enter multiple passwords to access the equipment, so I feel John's pain doing this in public.
My finance colleague, Ben Higgins, is just behind, actually. He will ride to my aid, I'm sure. So, Ben, you'll have a big I'm sure. Poor Ben. Sorry, I've got it here now. Bear with me, sorry, I do apologise. Yeah. So the net cost would be 724k, Councillor. At the moment, there's a moderate net income of 152k, and so it's the combination of those two which is the overall effect. It's set out very clearly in Ben's comments on page 124, page 12 of the report.
Thank you for clearing that up.
No problem.
So, if we do have that kind of deficit coming through, one of my concerns is that's obviously a parks budget problem. Would that be correctable by drawing on reserves? Where would the money for that come from if we went with option 3, for example?
It's not really possible, Councillor, to sort of specifically say that. I mean, the way that the council budgets work is the overall park service would initially be expected to try and find any additional pressure. It would then be passed to the wider management and place division to try and find that, and then something that we need to try and absorb within the GNR budget. And ultimately, if we can do that, it would be part of the wider council pressures. So that's how we approach it.
Initially, the parks budget would suffer substantial cuts, and then we sort of look for alternatives.
Well, the parks budget's under a lot of pressure as it is, as you know. So, I mean, we would look at it within the overall Western Region division as a whole, but we wouldn't certainly be expected to do that for looking elsewhere in the council, and we would do that.
With that in mind, and I appreciate that I am putting you on the spot here, and I apologise for that because the amendment has just come through. Do you have any thoughts on projected financial costs that might be associated if we did pass the amendment?
Well, there's two aspects to that. So the first thing is the cost of carrying out the initial study. I'm hoping that's going to be I don't know that counts, but I'm hoping that's going to be in the tens of thousands, and we'd somehow find a way to absorb that within the budget. Because if we were given a clear steer to proceed with option 2, where obviously we are carrying out less work. That said, I talked about this with the team just beforehand. Obviously, the delays that we've had so far means the costs have increased, so there isn't going to be an awful lot of headroom. But we would hope that we can absorb that. The cost of the solution, it completely depends what it is, Councillor. From our initial thinking, it could, some of the ideas would be quite expensive, but we'll really just have to cross that bridge when we've done that initial assessment.
All right, can I ask one more question? So this one's more of a procedural one. So I note, and this was something we briefly spoke on, no final decisions regarding drainage infrastructure will be made without thorough assessment. When it comes to final decisions, would that mean that this amendment would have this passed back to the committee, or is that a decision that would be undertaken by the chair?
Do you want me to have a go at answering that? Colleagues and themselves might need to. So if no other amendment was made, then we would move through to the final recommendation, which is to authorise the Executive Director Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee to take all steps required to progress to the preferred option. So that's what would apply. If you wanted something different than that, then we'd have to agree that, and we'd have to agree that as another amendment, which could be done.
All right, thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair. Just to say that can it be considered that that the task group that was part of this would be involved with the final decision?
the committee could certainly include a consultation with the council group if you wish to do that as part of the recommendation.
That would be sufficient.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's going to be. I mean, what's currently in option 2 is to set up a task group to look at what we will need to plan for when we run out again in probably a decade's time. So it's long-term thinking. That's what that task and finish group is meant to do. But clearly there is an immediate need to come to a conclusion on this particular point. So I'm not sure we can devolve to that particular task and finish group. We might have to consider some other democratic oversight arrangement to make sure that if your amendment is passed, that particularly you as the mover of the amendment are satisfied that what you asked for has been complied with, and then we can proceed. There's also, of course, as was mentioned earlier, some of these conditions anyway would be considered as part of the discharge of the planning obligations. So if I'm getting my phraseology right, so the planner's wrong in the room, but there is that process that will be underway anyway. Whether this amendment is passed or not, the conditions under the planning agreement do have to be complied with and monitored by officers and the planning committee if they wish to.
So I don't want to jeopardise the amendment, but at the same time, it would be valuable for members to be involved with the final conclusion of that. So maybe bring it back to committee.
Good idea.
Good idea.
So as part of this work, we could probably look at where it comes, maybe in the next, for the next.
Well, I'm reluctant to do an amendment to an amendment. It's up to you whether you accept it. But in the sentence that begins, they will consider all mitigation options, comma, and no final decisions regarding drainage, etc. Perhaps we could insert there, no final decisions will be made without consultation with the committee.
I think, as chair, we would probably resort to trusting your capable eyes and hands.
That's very kind of you.
I think I would take
Just the intention.
would not put this return to committee for another hearing. Was that it would be delegated.
Director Smith has just earned his salary and has given me inspiration, as they sometimes say in other places. There would be nothing to stop me as chair of the committee fully consulting with all 8 other members of the committee as I'm updated on what happens under this should the amendment pass. Okay, so I'm giving that guarantee in front of lots of witnesses if this amendment is passed. Because of the way the constitution of the council works, the officers will obviously oversee the work, they'll carry out what's required in the amendment should it be passed. They will update me and I will in turn update members of the committee. This amendment does not require the full committee to consider formally this process again. That's fine. Is that clear to everybody? I'm not going to use the phrase I used last time, but this is democracy in practice. I'll put it that way under the committee system. Right, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask briefly around, or generally around other burial sites, just to help contextualise things here, whether we're looking at option 2 amended or unamended. Jonathan, I think you referenced earlier the investigation of potential alternative sites in the north of Bristol. In the interest of transparency, all members have the opportunity to view a list of sites that were looked at in the context of Camford Cemetery from several years ago. Would you be able to briefly summarise why all of those sites on those lists have been ruled out as potential cemetery sites?
So we looked at various different factors in terms of actually how a site could be sort of eligible as a burial ground, and that included things like sort of surface water, bedrock, actually gradient of slope, access to the actual sort of area, were there any contaminants contained within the site. So we went through that. The actual approach, we did a desktop approach, actually looking at a number of sites which we could effectively rule out because they didn't fit that criteria, and that then narrowed it down to a small number of other sites whereby there were actually sort of more detailed sort of investigations into those sites to see if they actually sort of met that criteria.
Thank you very much. And of course, that investigation looked specifically at 20 sites in the north of Bristol and did not look at sites in the south and east of Bristol. Could you be willing to share if any potential sites have been considered in the south and east of Bristol that are not already cemeteries?
We have done a very, very sort of, I'll say, desktop-based actually sort of survey, and that's using sort of the GIS mapping survey, identifying actually sort of council-owned land, particularly. Again, utilising a criteria to have a look at, and through that sort of approach, we haven't been able to actually find any land of a suitable size or actually sort of meets the criteria that we actually put in. And again, the criteria was very similar to actually the criteria we actually sort of put in there. So, that what I'll say is a very high level one, so it's not been extensive. But I think if option 2 is actually sort of approved, then we can actually sort of go away and look at future sort of burial sites, because if option 2 is actually considered, even with the amendment, it does provide us actually with 10 years worth of burial space, an opportunity to consider if there is alternative sites, and that could be even actually sort of non-council land. So that would happen through that one.
And on the topic of non-council land, I saw a journalist who may or may not be in this room suggest the other day that a new cemetery could be built on, say, a local golf course. I'm aware that there are currently 2 private golf courses within the city of Bristol. Hypothetically, do you think that's feasible, and what would the barriers to something like that be?
Well, the barriers would be exactly the same. We'd have to actually sort of, if it was a local golf course, for example, we would have to do a compulsory purchase around that. There's could be a significant amount of value that we don't know, so it depends on what we're looking at. I think in terms of actually criteria, we would be looking at exactly the same criteria. Is it suitable land? Are the gradients right? Is it bedrock there? And what's the water table like? So we have to go through that. What we have to do is making sure we can satisfy both the planning authority but also the environment agency in terms of actually suitability of actually sort of land for burial space.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you very much, Chair. I have no further questions. Lisa.
Thank you. It's just a quick clarification, on the amendment. Is it referring to alternative proposals for the infrastructure only, so the pipes, or is it referring to all of the drainage within the SNCI, including the pond?
It's about the whole thing.
I would say, Councillor, you could say that drainage infrastructure would include the demolition pond as effectively drainage infrastructure.
Okay, any other? Tom, second go?
Just a quick one, is that would to include the pond, I assume we would need a new planning application, etc., and go through that process again as well.
We'll have to discuss that with the planners, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, we are considering today the extent to which we wish to implement an existing planning agreement. If we are outside that planning agreement, then other things come into play. Right, any other member contributions on option 2 in general or the amendment specifically? Right, well in that case we need to move to a vote first of all on option 2, which has been formally proposed and seconded by Councillor Malik and Councillor Hans. For those who are in favour of... Sorry, what? Oh, sorry. That's another example why 9 pairs of eyes are put in this process. Quite right. There was was a slip of the tongue and I wasn't reading the script, so apologies to the officers who gave me a script. I shouldn't really, should I? We must move first of all to a vote on the amendment that's been proposed by Councillor Malik and formally seconded by Councillor Hance. Those who are in favour of the amendment, please indicate. But that's the record, that is everybody, as it turns out. So option 2 is now amended by Councillor Malik's amendments. We now need to move to a vote on option 2 as amended. All those in favour of option 2 as amended, please indicate. That is the full 9 members of the committee. So option 2 as amended is passed. That means that option 3 falls because it's mutually exclusive, so we don't need to have a discussion unless anyone really wants one. We don't need to have a discussion on option 3. It effectively automatically falls. That almost brings us to the end. This is where I am going to revert to my script, because there is a final recommendation that we have to adopt as well. This is recommendation 3, which is that the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, which is John, in consultation with me, the Chair of the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee, to take all steps required to progress the preferred option, including procuring and awarding contracts over the key decision threshold. Now, because we've amended option 2, there's a lot of concurrent discussions built into that, into this recommendation 3, that involve the Director, his officers, me, but through me, the other members of the committee. This is all clear. Option recommendation 3 paves the way for us doing that. So I propose recommendation 3. I have a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Clark. So all those in favour of recommendation 3, please indicate. That, again, is all 9 of us. Thank you very much. And that concludes this paper. So thank you, everyone, for your members, for your deliberations. Thank you for everyone who came along today. There is a change to what we were proposing, so I hope everyone who participated in the public gallery felt it was worthwhile. Thank you for coming. We will now take another very short break because we've got another chunky paper coming up. If I could ask members to come back about 12:15, please. Good afternoon, everybody. Now move on to the next 2 items on our agenda. I think it was important to have a break, not because we needed one, but actually we did. It also gives a mental break because we've actually got quite an important report in front of us now. I have to say, well, I'm not really on the record because no one else is going to listen to it, but it's slightly disappointing that none of the media care about the biggest procurement contract this committee is going to let in the next 4 years. And which has huge implications as well for the population of our city, in particular the next generation. You will notice I said that, even if no one else did. Right, so this is a report on the re-procurement of the Public Health and Nursing Service and the Young People Specialist Substance Misuse Treatment Service as well. I know, I think most of the committee have been to a briefing that our officers gave to us about it, so you know a lot of the background that's fleshed out a lot of what's in the paper. I just need to formally say that this report seeks approval to start the re-procurement of the Bristol Public Health Nursing Service and the Young People Specialist Substance Misuse Treatment Service with delegated authority proposed for the subsequent steps. And some of the subsequent steps do involve coming back to the committee. Ultimately, it says here it's a key decision because it's involving spend of more than 500,000. Of course, the actual spend here is considerably more more than that. It's about 11 million out of 36 million public health grant that Christina oversees. Most of you would have met Christina, the Director of Public Health, before, but she's joined today by Joe Williams, who's one of our senior consultants in public health with a specialism in this area. So Joe is going to give a professional introduction to the report, and then we'll answer the questions, and undoubtedly we will have, once we've mentally decompressed and got back up to where we need to be. And I'm having a birthday penguin at this point, who does really need a chocolate in front of the Director of Public Health. Off you go, Joe.
Thank you for the introduction. So this item relates to the reprocurement of 2 services that we fund from the Public Health Grant, the Public Health Nursing Service and the Young People's Specialist Substance Misuse Treatment Service. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval to commence reprocurement, to seek delegated authority for subsequent steps in consultation with the committee chair, and to outline to you the indicative timescales for the reprocurement, including stakeholder consultation and engagement. So, by way of introduction, public health nursing is a statutory service for all children, young people and their families in Bristol. And the Young People's Specialist Substance Misuse Treatment Service is commissioned to meet substance misuse and mental health needs of young people. And the funding is currently in the region of £11 million per year for both these services, of which 95% of that is spent on public health nursing and in the region of 5% for the substance misuse element. So these services are currently part of the Community Children's Health Partnership contract, known as CCHP, and the lead commissioner for this contract is the Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire Integrated Care Board. And Bristol City Council is an associate commissioner. The current contract expires at the end of a 10-year contract on the 31st of March 2027. And we need to reprocure these services that we fund within the contract because we have a statutory duty to do so and to meet population needs. So just to give you a little bit more context about the contract, CCHP currently provides community health services for children, including community paediatrics, child and adolescent mental health services, and special educational needs and disability services. And the public health services sit alongside those. There are also services funded from Bristol City Council Children and Families and Education and Skills of the value of around £2 million per year. So there are multiple other associate commissioners within this contract, so ourselves, South Gloucester Council and NHS England. So the total contract value currently for CCHP is in the region of £46 million per year, and the ICB is the largest contributor to that funding. So the contract is currently held by Serona Care and Health Community Interest Company as the lead provider. It's important to note for our reprocurement and our existing contract that staff in these services are on NHS Agenda for Change contracts, which makes them eligible for national pay increases. And future pay increases are expected to be covered by a corresponding increase in the public health grant, but we cannot guarantee that, and there may be future budget pressures. So given this is a known risk, this will be managed in the procurement process through careful planning, financial modelling, and including a budget margin. Just to give you a little bit more on each of the services, public health nursing, to start, is for all children and young people from conception to age 19, and up to 25 for those with special educational needs and disability. The service includes a health visiting component for 0 to 5-year-olds and school nursing to 5 to 19 or 25-year-olds for some, and the family nurse partnership, which is for young parents with their first baby. The service offers 4 levels of support at community, universal, targeted and specialist level, and the public health nurses provide strength-based advice, guidance, support and signposting in health and wellbeing needs, and through home visits, group and drop-in sessions online and through targeted services. There are several nationally mandated elements, including 5 health visitor reviews, and the National Child Measurement Programme. However, all parts of the service are important and include essential prevention and early intervention. The second service, the Young People's Specialist Substance Misuse Service, is for under 18s with drug or alcohol problems, and it provides pharmacological, psychosocial and harm reduction interventions, and it aims to prevent the escalation of substance misuse and related harm. That's led by a specialist team in the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service and is commissioned in line with national guidance, which recommends integrated substance misuse treatment and mental health support. CAMS is currently subcontracted by Serona to the Avon Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership Trust, AWP. So the table in the paper outlines the tasks and timescales for our re-procurement. This would include the establishment of steering groups to oversee the process, an options appraisal to determine the best procurement model. There are several different potential models that we need to look at with the other current associate and lead commissioners, and of course we could recommission the providers collectively or separately in the future. So all those options will be looked at in an options appraisal. We will develop a commissioning strategy and new service specifications based on needs assessment, latest guidance and best practice, and consultation with stakeholders. We will put these plans out for public consultation, currently scheduled for the summer next year, and we will seek to engage with the committee at key points in the process, including regarding the options appraisal, the public consultation, and of course the contract award. And we will continue to liaise with the committee chair to confirm the details of when you would wish to be engaged in this process. So then finally we have the recommendations listed on the report, and at its heart it's to approve the commencement of this re-procurement process.
Okay, thanks very much. Joe, if I'll just ask a couple of questions first while the committee warm themselves up for their questions. As I understand it, these services, particularly the nursing service and children of school age, are universal but not mandatory. Does that lead to some tension about who takes up the offer of this universal service? Are there some groups that are less likely to want their child to have their weight measured or their teeth to be checked or anything else that might be done?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's important to note these are universal services with elements that are offered to all children and young people in the city. It's also accessible to all families through various routes. So, for example, the school age element is accessible by every child, whether they're in school or not in school in the city. And that includes, for instance, a text messaging service for them to access this service direct. They don't need to be physically present in the school to meet with them and contact them. In terms of the offer and whether it's equitable across the city, it is certainly offered on that basis, and there's great efforts to ensure that there's good access. We include in our papers a quality impact assessment that details some of the ways that we continue to work on that. Of course, there are elements that some families choose to opt out of, and of course there is that option for them if they wish.
Okay, thank you. Emily and Lisa?
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I first can say that I really support this, but I just wanted to ask how the committee are going to be involved. But it feels like this is a very, very beginning stage, and it'd just be useful to know how the committee will be involved in this going forward, or if we will.
Thank you. Just a couple of things to start. There will be very extensive stakeholder engagement in the re-procurement process, both of our public health funded services and the broader services. So there will be those wider opportunities, but of course as a committee you may want to have a particular input. We've indicated currently on our timetable where that might be, times that you would like to look at it in committee. But we will also be briefing the chair regularly, and if there are other points in the process where you would like to have some specific involvement, we can include that in our procurement timetable.
Lisa?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much for bringing this report. It's so important. There's some really stark figures in this report. In particular, I noticed that the south of Bristol has the greatest number of children in need, with a total of 17.8% of children under 16 living in relative low-income families. I was wondering, in terms of the consultation process in the previous procurement, were there any, how did engagement within those communities go, and were there any lessons that you took from that round of consultation that we could take forward into the next one? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The engagement in the last procurement was very extensive, and I think a really important part of this is engagement direct with children and young people. You know, these are services that are for them, but also for parents, particularly for younger children, that there's really key that we get the engagement right with that. I should say that we have had engagement throughout the provision of the service as well. In fact, in the current commissioning model, there is engagement embedded in it and provided within the service. So it's a key component to hear young people's voice throughout. But I think it's a really important point to make about making sure that that is, again, reaching our communities in all parts of the city, and we will certainly be planning that very carefully, and we welcome your support in doing that.
And then Carl.
I know we're jumping the gun a bit, but Serona is our current provider, isn't it? And it's an absolute behemoth and it's huge. Are there any actual other contenders for this service? Are there any other organisations big enough to take it on, apart from Serona?
I won't be in a position here in public to name specific providers, but of course we will be doing market engagement processes to understand the market that is there at the moment. So that will be part of the process, and certainly in previous procurements and in our neighbours' procurements there have been other providers interested in these contracts. But the other thing to say is we will be needing to work to the procurement regulations, of course, and there are different models of going through that procurement process as well with the providers that are around us. So we'll keep you fully briefed and up to date with each step.
Cara?
Thanks for the report, thanks for the briefing the other day about obesity and the measures through childhood. This is obviously really important work, and I'm glad that we'll be kept informed as it moves forward. I just wanted to address slightly the substance misuse. I understand that we'll be educating, part of this will be educating children about substance misuse. And I just wanted to flag the use of language if we're talking about education, because we're talking about drug and alcohol use, which I know that's a common use of language, but actually alcohol is a drug, so we should be talking about drugs including alcohol. If you went into a school and said to children, we're going to be talking about fruit and strawberries, they'd think something was a bit wrong with what you were saying. So I just think if we could rephrase where possible, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful, and I guess there's an opportunity as well as we go into a next stage of the service to check our language, refresh it. So thank you for that comment, we will take that on board.
Any other observations you could add on?
Chair, just wanted to ask about the contract and Serena in particular. Obviously, this, the whole contract has a huge amount of social value and lots of different things that would probably encapsulate that. But is there a specific demand from such big contractors to feed into the social value kind of agenda and provide? And if so, what types of things does that social value contribution go to?
Thank you. Yeah, and you may wish to add to that as well. I mean, it's important to note that our current provider is a community interest company and a not-for-profit organisation, and is also in partnership with other organisations, including voluntary sector organisations. So I think it's really important that these are locally based providers, and we will obviously be looking at the social value element as we go through our procurement process. We're not in a position to judge which providers currently we'll be working with, but it will be an important element of what we're considering.
Christina, you preside over 36 £1.6 million worth of spend. So you probably have enough more oversight of this.
So, social value is a very important part of any contracting. It's important for us in public health, obviously, because the social value is where you get the added value around the context, but it's built into the council's procurement processes anyway. So there's a percentage for social value, we're advised on social value, and again, as we develop the specification, as we have those conversations, there's an opportunity to feed in, to express views about what sort of social value you think we might want to see from a future contract.
Right, if there are no further comments, I'll just go to the recommendations, which are that the Public Health and Community Policy Committee, 1, approves the commencement of a re-procurement process for the Bristol Public Health Nursing Service and Young People's Specialist Substance Misuse Treatment Service, and secondly, delegates authority to the Director of Public Health in consultation with the Public Health and Communities Committee Chair to take all steps required to procure and award contracts for the services in line with the Council's procurement rules, which could include NHS provider selection regime regulations, and within the maximum budget available, the exact amount will be confirmed but will be in the region of £11 billion. Thirdly, authorises the Director of Public Health to accept and allocate any additional external funding that supports these services in accordance with the Council's procurement rules and any national regulations or funding restrictions. And finally, notes the indicative timescales of the re-procurement process, including consultation engagement with key stakeholders, including committee members. You know, fellow members, that in the table in the report there's at least a couple of other opportunities when this will come back to us, but as this is quite a process, Emily and I will see more of it in chairs' briefings, but we will, as we spot things we think are of wider interest to the committee, we'll have more briefings as well. So in other words, extemporising away from the recommendations, they're probably not supposed to do, but there we are. But can I have a seconder for the recommendations? Thank you, Emily. All those who are in favour of the recommendations, please show. That is all of us, so therefore there's nobody against. Thank you very much, and thank you, Joe, thank you, Christina. Sorry about the wait, but you could see that it was necessary. And look forward to getting regular updates on how this is all going. Thank you very much. Right, we now have a changing of the guard. While Joe moves and Pete joins us. Nobody has to come to the front. So between yourselves, who's doing it? No, you get started. Not real birthday. I'm looking forward to it. The lunch bell is ringing. Right, so we now move on to the final of the 4 reports that have been in front of us today, which is the quarterly performance report for quarter 1 of the current year, 2024-2025. This report provides an update on performance against the Council's business plan as relevant to the remit of this committee for quarter 1, 2024-2025. This is just for noting and for information, so there's no decisions here for us to make. But if you have a look at the grid, the red, amber, green, I've got that in light, which is rather unhelpful, of the back of the report, then there are lots of interesting things here that we might want to probe into more detail. But before we do that, we're joined by Pete Franklin, who is the Strategic Intelligence and Performance Advisor from the Council, to outline the report and to explain, Pete, that this is something that all committees are now going through. Are we the first, or among the first?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we are.
Marvellous.
Yeah, I think, Chair, you summarised that incredibly well. That's exactly what we're here to do, is to look at the quarter two performance against our corporately published actions and metrics within the 24-25 corporate plan. What I've done for you in this report is given you a summary of those metrics and actions that are within the remit of this policy committee. Obviously, the other measures will go to the other 7 committees. Most of the actions and KPIs, performance indicators, fall within the remit of public health, Christina's directorate. What you'll note is there are 2 that fall within another directorate, 2 directorates, one within resources and one within growth and regeneration. And interestingly, they're the 2 that I've highlighted as areas that not necessarily of concern, but those which fall outside of where we'd expect them to be. So, of the 7 actions, 71% of them, 5 are on track. Those that aren't on track, as Chair's noted, there are in Appendix A2, there's information about what actions are being taken to address that performance. Interestingly, one of the actions, one of the KPIs for an outcome measure is around children aged 10 to 11 with excess weight, and in there is an explanation about what's happening in the measurement period that's going on, and we'll have that performance later in the year be brought back to this committee as the quarters progress. It says in the report 50% of the performance metrics are better than target. Well, there's only 2 performance metrics which are called priority metrics, and we'll have a look at those in a moment. And as I say, the outcome measures, they are all within Appendix 2. So, really, I would invite you to ask any questions of me or colleagues within directorates about the Appendix A2.
Thanks, Pete. And this is the existing corporate plan, as we're clear about it, as adopted by the last council. So if I could put it this way, obviously during our time as councillors, a refreshed corporate plan will come before us, and some parts of that this committee will be feeding into, but that's something that's in the pipeline for us to look forward to early next year, I think. So some of these targets and things that we monitor may stay the same. We may be adding new ones in, but that's some work that's ahead of us. If I can ask about the 2 areas, in fact, that are not Christina's remit, as we've still got Director Smith with us. Something that is flagged as behind schedule is the risks associated with ash dieback. This is something that will come to committee at some point. Emily and I have had a rather, is alarming the right word? Worrying, perhaps, report about the progress of ash dieback, but I thought you'd done a runner then.
I had to find a microphone, Chair.
You've moved to a different microphone, excellent. John, do you want to just say something about what we are going to have to look up on ash dieback? It's behind at the moment, but in the background, I know a lot of work is going on about it.
Yes, indeed. So this is a serious issue. It involves significant amounts of activity and significant amount of work, which isn't currently fully funded through the council's budget, it's fair to say. So John and his team have done a lot of work on it. We are bringing a specific proposal in terms of how to address it to corporate leadership shortly, John, aren't we? Which will set out the budget implications of it. We were asked to do that specifically when we raised it as part of a budget and budget pressures item, and they thought it was sufficiently significant given health and safety issues that we reported as a separate item of CLP. So I think that's happening in the next few weeks. You can find mine now. And we will update you through and Emily through the meetings in the usual way of chair it as how it progresses. But certainly I think we've managed to land the significance and the consequences of this.
Thanks. So that's a pleasure that awaits us. If you think what we had in the cemeteries earlier was heated, this could be very heated, potentially coming forward, but it's the major part of it in some of it is public safety as much as anything. But that will come to us at the appropriate moment. Do we have somebody here from Policy, Strategy and Digital? Thought we did. Jean, got glasses for shorter. Jean Candler, thank you. Can I just ask you about this last flag of them, about the response rate consultation not being where we would want it to be from groups across the city, and quite often when we look at the qualities impact assessments or who has given opinions, it's fairly evident that some groups are participating in a greater percentage or lower percentage than others. Perhaps you could outline what the council, the lengths the council goes to make sure that respondents are representative of the population.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's important to see the numbers in the context of a year. So this is around in-scope consultations, so those are citywide consultations only. They need to have at least 500 respondents to be included in the data. In Q1 of this financial year, we didn't do any surveys because of the elections, so there's no data. So we're looking at 12 months, including one quarter without any data. The Q1 of the previous financial year, we had a survey which got a lot of respondents from some of our most deprived communities, and that's why there's the drop, what looks like a drop or change. So it's really important to look at the data over a longer period of time. We've got some quite useful graphs which we can share with you afterwards, which kind of show how the change. So if you look over a much longer period of time, so for example back in 2017, we were getting effectively three times as many respondents from our least deprived communities than our most deprived. We're now closer to about 1.3, which is, in another way of looking at that would be saying, for every 4 people who respond in one of our least deprived areas, let's say Westbury, we would have 3 respondents from one of our most deprived areas, as an example, Hartcliffe. So that's to give you an understanding of the numbers. So that is what's important, is to look over that period of time, over a longer period of time, to see what the trend is. We've set ourselves a very ambitious stretch target of 1, which is basically parity. So we want one respondent from Westbury, as an example, and 1 respondent from Hartcliffe. In reality, that will change depending on A, what kind of consultations we're running, so what sort of interest to people, and also the techniques and tactics we use to encourage people to respond. We know, for example, respondents from some of our most deprived areas, we need to target them more strongly. We need to perhaps reach out through paper method, direct mail as an example, through targeted social media. We do have limited resource and budget, so we do need to consider how we achieve that end goal. So we're always looking and striving to reach those less heard groups, but we won't achieve it every single survey, which is why we like to look over a 12-month period and even longer. So we're always, obviously, that is a sort of a wider discussion for the council, I think, in terms of what its ambitions are, what kind of tactics and priorities it wants us to place on different approaches so that we can reach different groups. The final point I just wanted to make is that irrespective of how many actual respondents we get, we do have mechanisms to look at what the difference is of those responses, so that we can tell you, for example, in the budget consultation from last year, what people from the most deprived communities were saying, and it was that different from what people were saying from the least deprived communities.
Yeah, I think this isn't a matter for this committee, but it is a matter for all of us as councillors. Obviously, consultation on the budget will be coming soon, and this is likely to be the trickiest budget that the council's faced for as long as I can remember. So it is important that we make every effort to make sure that all voices in the city are heard. So I hope your colleagues are all having a good look at that. Emily?
I guess just following up from that, my question is, when we get this for the next quarter, will that be significantly better, that figure, do you think?
It would be impossible for me to know right now, and I think the numbers will go up and down. I think it would be better to look at the graph showing the numbers
that we have from 2017 up till now to show you the trend. And if over, say, I would say more Q4 of this year, if we're moving away from that one figure, so going above one consistently, then we would need to look at how we can change that rather than looking just one quarter to the next, because it would depend on what surveys we've run and which report in that particular quarter. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, it's just obviously the reasoning around that we've been given is specifically for the quarter as well, so it's just, yeah, trying to understand if that was like an anomaly for this quarter or, yeah, okay, thanks.
Lisa?
Thanks, yeah, it was good to see that the domestic abuse safe accommodation strategy is on track. Myself and Emily actually had a visit to Nextlink, who provide that service where they talked about their sanctuary scheme, which enables victims and survivors to stay in their own homes rather than having to be the one to leave, which I welcome as something really progressive and forward-thinking. I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation and what that is. The Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation that is in progress, could you say a little bit more about what that is and what it gives us?
Yeah, thank you. That's part of the work that's led by our Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Partnership, led by Nextlink for us, but it is trying to increase the amount of accommodation across the city that's delivered in the partnership, and the accreditation is ensuring that that accommodation is safe. It's accredited as safe and secure.
So what does that, can you sort of give an example of what might be included as part of that, making sure that it's safe and secure?
I can't, and exactly, I wouldn't want to, and I haven't got, Carol's usually here who leads on this work, but we can certainly take that as an action. If somebody could take that as an action, we can get that for the committee. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I think I was actually confusing you, but so are we talking about safe houses basically? Like, are we talking about like safe houses in Bristol? Is that what this is about?
Yes, it's accommodation which is safe, and obviously where there's refuge type accommodation, that has got safety built in. There are people there. If you're looking to broaden the amount of accommodation that you have, you've got different providers. We have to ensure that there's the same level of safety and security for people if we're placing them there.
And sorry, also putting you on the spot, do you have any idea what if we have waiting lists for any of those units?
I don't, Lisa, sorry, but again, if somebody can take a note, we can get that data for you, yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. Tom?
Thank you. So I was just looking at this page 257 on the reduce the percentage of people in the most deprived areas of Bristol reporting core mental well-being. And there wasn't a lot of detail on that, and when I was looking through the 5 Bristol plans and the 5 at work, there also seemed to be a certain amount of incompleteness to it. In particular, I'm sort of thinking about the 5 at work and the 5 at night. In my own wards, I'm quite concerned about the mental health issues I am seeing around people in precarious work or who are in unemployment and have perpetual difficulties with employment and mental health impacts that has, in addition to all the other problems in the area like drugs, like crime. So it would be good to have some more detail and perhaps to talk through at some point what we can do on mental health for some of the least advantaged individuals in the city.
Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate your support with this one. So this measure is one of our quality of life indicators. So it's a sample survey from across the city. And our work on this is about creating the conditions within communities, within neighbourhoods. So there's a range of work that happens at a very local level. We have a Thrive at Work programme, Thrive at Night, Thrive at Communities programme. We have very little public health resource that goes into this. However, across the city there's a huge amount of resource which is in communities and in the city that we try to mobilise and corral. Very happy to pick it up afterwards if you want to get more involved and support the work that we do, and if you've got any other suggestions as to where we might focus our attention. Separately to what we do around what we call public mental health, that's the general health and wellbeing, which is our job as a local authority. There is also a mental health strategy which is led by the Integrated Care Board and Partnership, to which we contribute. And that then is the interface between creating the conditions which keep us all well, at work, in community, at home, and when we need to seek support for our mental health, which starts with usually a trip to the GP and then into specialist services. But the vast majority of interventions are not in those specialist mental health services. They are about what we do in the community. So.
Appreciate the response and thank you for clarifying on that. I'm just concerned that we are seeing people fall through the cracks, as it were, and I was not able to be reassured by what I could find, but I appreciate there's a lot to discuss, so if we can do that at some point in the future, that'd be very good.
Absolutely, Tom. Couldn't agree more, really. So perhaps we can pick it up outside, take it forward with anyone else that's interested. Thank you.
As I was saying on the previous item, an awful lot of conversation clearly takes place in between meetings, particularly between me and Christine, and we have been discussing that to increase the committee's knowledge of mental health services, we are going to have some briefings, and we decided we'd split them in between services for children and services for adults. Yeah. So that's coming. Are there
So some of these columns have got monetarily not applicable. And it would be really useful to have more information, especially about BPOM 251, which talks about reducing the percentage of people whose day-to-day life is affected by fear of crime, especially with the heightened spell of violence really within 3 or 4 wards in the city, East and actually not so especially. There's no comparative data, it doesn't tell me what 21% really means. And obviously reaching out to those communities to ask them about their quality of life is going to be significantly difficult, I can understand. At the same time, that's exactly where we need to be targeting a request for information. It's the same when you look at some of the other quality of life indicators. It would be really good to have some comparative data and know what percentages were last quarter, last year maybe, and how we can mitigate, I suppose.
Thanks, Councillor Lally. If I take the 2001, was that the community safety one, the first one that you referred to?
It's on
fear of crime. Well, that was the first one. Yeah. So just to say, on this is sort of historic indicator that's just come over to us. We do have, and there will be coming, an annual report on community safety, quite a detailed report which comes to this committee. I think it's due to come in January, I believe. But that's where you will see the granularity of all of the data that we've got around crime and disorder and community safety. And we should certainly, it's another area that we need to do a deep dive briefing on before we discuss it, before you receive that in the public forum. The quality of life indicators, the comparisons are only really from that last year to this year because they're a sample population survey. They're not the best source of data necessarily in terms of, we've got other data where we might be comparing between core cities, for example, and levels of antisocial behaviour. You will want to see what's the difference between what we see in Bristol and other core cities. That would come forward in the more detailed report. So this is, people might want to say a little bit about why we select these kind of indicators for this level of report.
Thank you, Christina. Good question, really good question actually. These indicators that say monitor only, they're what we call outcome measures, and we brand them as outcome measures because on their own, we as a local authority cannot influence necessarily what the outcome of those indicators are. It's joint. There are a lot of stakeholders that take part in this. Fear of crime, There's so many people that will be involved in that process. Christina made the point that it's a local survey. It is a local survey. It's done through our quality of life survey. So what we've made the decision to do is for those outcome measures not to set a target, to actually say, we're going to monitor this. Your question was great in terms of what's the trend look like. Well, I've got the trend here. I can see it. And from 2018, it's been going 18, 16, 16, 19, 17, and most recently 21%. So your question is, why the spike? Why has it gone up so much? And that's the kind of thing that you want to see in order to ask those questions. Well, the thing I was going to end with, Chair, when I finish, was I was going to say, please, councillors, I'd encourage you, in the report there's a link to our dashboard, and in the dashboard it's got information in there that you can click on in a user-friendly way. There's a user-friendly guide on there, I wrote it. And also, if there's any questions or concerns that you've got about how to access or use it, please don't ever hesitate to contact me.
Thanks for that.
Does that answer your question, Chair? Sorry, Councillor.
It does. The only other thing I was going to say was about the quality of life survey and the way that we do it. We saw here, just at the last report, I think, the University of Bristol sent out a hard copy and there was a spike in how people respond. So it might be worth considering different ways of getting that out to people, cross-sections of the public.
We do hard copies and we do electronic copies and we do boosters for those areas as well. So,
yeah, I would say there's quite a lot of effort goes into getting that questionnaire out and ensuring that we've got really good responses from across the city. It's certainly something that all councillors could really help with as well, so when it's going out to really promote it locally in your wards. But we can do that, we can retranslate it, we can do hard copies, yeah.
Okay, everyone, thank you. All we need to do in this report is note it, but this is something that will come back to us. It is, well, almost every meeting in that case, can really meet 6 times a year, and I'm sure that means we'll have the added joy at some of the meetings of having the finance updates as well as we progress. So thank you everyone for your work together today. Enjoy your lunch. I've got a few interviews.